Chapter 213. Nanny Chin was stunned. This person was very young. He looked even younger than Su Jiang. However, when he looked over, his gaze was like a cold pool that chilled her to the bone. She had never seen this person before and didn't know his identity. However, her intuition told her that he was more dangerous than Su Jiang. Nanny Chin was a widow when she was young. However, she was beautiful when she was young. After her husband died, it wasn't like she couldn't get married. However, she wasn't willing to give her son to a distant relative. Other men were willing to marry her, but they weren't willing to raise a burden. Only Blacksmith Nyo was willing. However, Nanny Chin looked down on Blacksmith Nyo's status and thought that he was poor. Later, when she entered the He estate and her life became better, she gave up on the idea of marriage. However, there was an unclear relationship between her and Blacksmith Nyo. Nanny Chin originally didn't care much about Blacksmith Nyo. However, after He Wanru's accident, Blacksmith Nyo gave her a way out. During the days when the two of them went through thick and thin together, Nanny Chin did develop some true feelings for him. This young man hit the snake where it hurts. He immediately threatened Blacksmith Nyo's life. Nanny Chin was much more passive. She said, Concubine mother, he made a mistake and was punished by the madam. Concubine mother, his body was weak and couldn't endure it, so she passed away. After saying this, she looked at the young man and sized up his expression. The other party's expression was still indifferent and his voice was calm. I don't have the patience to listen to your nonsense. If you think this person's life isn't enough, I can add the lives of Wu Han and his son. As soon as he said this, Nanny Chin cried out, no. Wu Han was her son. This person threatened her with the lives of his son and grandson. The other party wasn't Su Jiang. If Su Jiang killed her son and grandson, he would still be afraid that Nanny Chin would fight to the death and reveal the truth. However, this strange man didn't seem to care. He didn't have any information on her, but he knew her like the back of his hand. Nanny Chin fell to the ground. In an instant, her heart was filled with despair. Don't worry, I don't intend to take your life. He leaned forward slightly and stared into Mother Chin's eyes. There seemed to be a sharp glint in his clear, watery eyes. Su Jiang's people have been keeping an eye on Wu Han and his son to force you to show yourself. But if you tell me what you know, I can save their lives. Granny Chin was shocked. This condition was too tempting. For the first time in her life, she was bold. How can this servant believe you? The other party smiled carelessly and stretched out his hand. The black-robed man behind him stepped forward and handed him a bracelet. The young man waved the bracelet in front of Mother Chin. Chin Mama was shocked. This bracelet was made by someone when her grandson was born. She even asked an eminent monk to consecrate it so that it could protect her grandson's safety and health. Now that she had fallen into the other party's hands, she knew that there was no way she could negotiate with the other party. The only thing she could do was to convince the other party to let her family and Blacksmith Nyo go. I'll tell you everything. Mother Chin mournfully said, Concubine, he was executed by the eldest brother. The family law was just a cover. Concubine, he was locked up in the mansion and was afraid that outsiders would find out. She was fed medicine every day and passed away after a few days. The young man was not surprised and only asked, why did Su Jiang execute He Wanru? Because concubine, he made a big mistake and had to die. What mistake? Mother Chin's hand trembled. She took a deep breath as if she wanted to give herself a bit of courage. After a while, she said, because concubine, he killed young mistress. When these words came out, the room became silent. Wan Ning and Fei Nu behind them were shocked. Everyone in Shuajing knew that the young mistress of the Su family was blind and couldn't see clearly. She accidentally fell into the pond and drowned. But now, it was said that the young mistress died in the hands of concubine. How absurd was this? No matter what, the young mistress of the He family, He Rufei's younger sister, had a high status. If she died because of jealousy with a concubine, it was too absurd. No wonder Su Jiang couldn't wait to execute He Wanru and all the people who knew about it. Otherwise, if the imperial censor reported that he didn't manage the family strictly, Su Jiang would lose his black hat. However, if the He family didn't know, why would they send another daughter over when one of their daughters had already died? If the He family knew, why would they let it go so easily? Xiao Ju's eyes slightly moved. Mother Qin's words confirmed his guess. Why did Yuanru kill young Mistress Su? He changed his words. Why did Su Zhiheng kill young Mistress Su? Mother Qin was shocked and quickly said, No, young master. Concubine, he killed young mistress. It was a matter between women and has nothing to do with other people. Why would the eldest brother kill young mistress without any reason? The eldest brother is kind and gentle. How could he do such a thing? Xiao Ju looked at her indifferently. I said before, I don't have the patience to listen to your lies. In the next moment, the sword in Fei Nu's hand was pressed against Blacksmith Nyo's neck. Blood flowed down his neck. No one could be indifferent in a life and death situation. The man, who had always been calm and composed, couldn't help but reveal a trace of panic in his eyes. Mother Qin was so scared that her face turned pale. No, stop. Fei Nu's sword didn't go any further. Xiao Ju said, I'll ask one more time. Why did Su Zhiheng kill his wife? If Mother Qin was still hesitant and unwilling to tell the truth at this juncture, it seemed that the matter she was hiding was not a small secret. Mother Qin closed her eyes and seemed to be in a panic. The other party's sword seemed to be slowly pressing against Blacksmith Nyo's neck. The bracelet engraved with scriptures was clearly in front of her eyes. She suddenly said loudly, I don't know. I was too scared. I advised her not to do it, but she said that it was the eldest brother's idea and that it didn't matter. She would do as the eldest brother said and nothing would happen. I was very far away and I was very scared. I only vaguely heard concubine he say to young mistress. General. Xiao Ju suddenly looked up. In an instant, his eyes were as sharp as a knife, so piercing that Mother Qin didn't dare to speak. He asked, What did you just say? Mother Qin trembled as she said, Concubine, he said to young mistress. General, he. At that time, she was scared to death. Although there were many swords in the residence that didn't see blood, Mother Qin had never directly touched a human life. Of course, she also wanted He Wanru's position in the Su family to be stable. However, Mother Qin clearly saw that with He Wanru's family background, she would never be able to become Su Zhiheng's wife. Therefore, when He Wanru told her that she wanted to kill He Yin, Mother Qin was shocked and tried her best to persuade her to give up the idea. However, He Wanru steeled her heart and refused to listen to her. Mother Qin felt that it was strange. In the end, He Wanru finally revealed the truth. This matter was ordered by Su Zhiheng, and the person who wanted to kill He Yin was Su Zhiheng. However, He Wanru refused to say why Su Zhiheng wanted to kill He Yin. She only said that it was a secret between her and Su Zhiheng. At that time, Mother Qin had actually already realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, He Wanru had been spoiled by her family when she was young and married into the Su family. Su Zhiheng had a gentle temperament. Even the head of the family, He Yin, didn't care about the family's affairs. He Wanru was ambitious and brainless. She didn't listen to Mother Qin's words. By the time Mother Qin wanted to do something, it was already too late. When He Yin was drowned that day, Mother Qin hid among the old women outside and was extremely shocked. He Wanru's battle array was too big. With so many people, it was as if she didn't have any scruples. She vaguely heard the conversation between He Wanru and He Yin. It was as if they were talking in riddles and didn't speak clearly. However, Mother Qin clearly remembered that He Wanru called He Yin General He. General He was General Fei Hong, He Ru Fei, and He Yin's elder brother. What did this have to do with He Yin? At that time, Mother Qin didn't understand in her panic. It wasn't until she escaped from the Su family and wandered around with Blacksmith Nyo that she carefully thought about this matter and smelled a trace of something unusual. She seemed to have caught a glimpse of the secret, but this was really too sensational. Once this secret was exposed to the world, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, Mother Qin would never speak of this matter unless it was absolutely necessary. Now, every time she thought of the scene that day, she felt a chill all over her body. That day, under the watchful eyes of everyone, young mistress Sue was forced into a pool of cold water and never came out again. However, everyone who was present at that time was already dead in the eyes of others. Even Iwanru didn't expect that Su Jihung would make a move on her not long after he took his wife's life. It was all karmic retribution that was fated in the underworld. No one spoke in the room. Mother Qin couldn't help but raise her head to look at the other party. Her heart was on tenterhooks. This was her biggest secret. She didn't know who the other party was or why they wanted to know. Continue, Xiao Ju said. It was better to have someone speak than to remain silent. Mother Qin simply said everything. After young mistress died, I predicted that concubine mother he would most likely be silenced by the eldest son. I was afraid and wanted to ask concubine mother he to escape with me, but she refused. At that time, all the servants in the residence, especially those who were present in concubine mother's courtyard that day, were forbidden from leaving the residence. When I escaped, I asked around and heard that all the servants in concubine mother's courtyard had been replaced. They were all dead. My lord, as Mother Qin spoke, she wiped away her tears. This is all I know. Although I served concubine mother he before, concubine mother he refused to tell me why the eldest son wanted to kill young mistress. I'm only a servant of the Su family. I don't know anything. I beg you to let us go. Xiao Ju stood up and looked at the two of them, saying, You two can stay here for the time being. Then he walked out of the room. The imperial bodyguards outside the door followed him in. Xiao Ju walked forward. This wasn't a Xiao family, but a courtyard. Wanning and Fei Nu walked beside Xiao Ju. They were both shocked. Xiao Ju walked to the end of the courtyard and stopped at the flower wall. He had already arrived. There were only green leaves on the flower wall. There were no red flowers. His voice fell in the wind, carrying a biting cold. Wanning, when was Irufei and young Mistress Sue's birthday? Wanning replied, It was the spring equinox. On that day, first Madam He and second Madam He gave birth at the same time. Irufei and young Mistress Sue were born at the same time. Their birthdays were all the spring equinox. After saying this, she and Fei Nu looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. When they were in Jinling, they already knew from Hua Yuxian that He Rufei, at that time, was a woman. Now, He Rufei's actions in the Battle of Hua Yuan clearly indicated that he wasn't He Rufei at that time. Xiao Ju had always ordered Wanning to investigate the women who were close to He Rufei. But now, it seemed that there was no need to investigate anymore. Although Mother Qin only said General He, these three words were already very clear. He Rufei at that time. He Rufei who studied in the Xianchang school. He Rufei who went to the Cloud Pavilion with the other youths in Jinling. And He Rufei who had outstanding military achievements in the Fuyue army. Was actually young Mistress Sue's cousin who was born at the same time as He Rufei. And now, young Mistress Sue was already dead. No one in the world knew this secret. So He Rufei became the real General Feihong. Continue to investigate everything related to young Mistress Sue's life, Xiao Ju said. The relationship between Su Jiheng and He Rufei may not be simple. Su Jiheng should know about He Rufei and his cousin's identity swapping. Wanting nodded in agreement. Suddenly, she thought of something and hesitated for a moment before saying, But young master, Missy bribed the Su family's manservant to ask about Mother Qin's whereabouts. I think it's because of this. He Rufei and young Mistress Sue's identity swapping was a secret. So how did Missy know? And why did she investigate this matter? He Rufei and the Su family both had their eyes on Miss He. Previously, this subordinate thought that their real target was young master, but now it seems that this might not be the case. What role did Missy play in this? Luaning was much older than Xiao Ju and had practically watched Xiao Ju grow up. Many times, she was not as nervous about Xiao Ju as Qi Wu and Fei Nu. She said whatever was on her mind. Xiao Ju didn't say anything. On the other hand, Fei Nu couldn't help but say, Miss He and young Mistress Su have the same name. That's just a coincidence. Luaning continued without thinking. I've investigated. Miss He is Miss He. There's no substitute identity. Moreover, Miss He's name has always been this name. There's no other possibility. I originally thought that young Mistress Su might have a twin sister, but the age doesn't match. Moreover, the He family's neighbors can testify that Miss He looks like her mother. Therefore, Hien definitely couldn't be young Mistress Su's twin sister. Regarding Hien, let's stop here. Xiao Ju said, I know what I'm doing. Fei Nu and Luaning looked at each other in dismay. No one had thought that such a simple matter would lead to so many follow-ups. Not only did they discover the shocking secret of Ru Fei and his cousin's identity swap, now even Hien's behavior became confusing. But since Xiao Ju had spoken, they could only do as instructed. Xiao Ju said, watch these two people, don't let them escape. The two complied. When Fei Nu and Luaning left to do their own things, Xiao Ju looked at the quiet sky. In the winter of Shuajing, there were only a few stars scattered on the black velvet cloth, like the glimmering light of a clear spring in the sky. Under the water, lanterns were lively and bright. The longevity noodles on the boat were steaming hot, and the cups made of leaves were sweet like honey. The girl's face was hidden behind the lanterns. At that time, the night was too beautiful, and the wind was too cool, so much so that people neglected to notice that her eyes were a little red from the steam rising from them. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Isn't today your birthday? The girl's eyes curved. Commander-in-Chief, you're so good to me. Thank you. He slowly lowered his head, and his gaze fell on the reflection of the water in the pond beside his boots. That day was Jiang's water god festival, the spring equinox. Ian's mood was really not good. Since she wasn't able to find blacksmith Neo and find Mother Qin's whereabouts, she had many suspicions in her heart. If Su Jihing had found Mother Qin before her, Mother Qin would have been doomed. To her, she would have lost an important witness. She originally wanted to see Fu Wang, but now she was embarrassingly short of money, and the Su family's manservant was particularly greedy. If she went empty-handed, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get any useful information. Therefore, on the second day He Yin returned from the market, everyone in the He family noticed that she was in low spirits. Yin Yin, father was passing by East Street today. I heard that the young ladies who came to Shua Jing had a kind of perfume. Father bought one for you. You can apply it on your hands every day, and it will also smell good. He Yin listlessly said, Thank you, father. He Sui was also very distressed. Originally, this daughter of his was born with the countenance of a flower and the face of the moon. Although her temperament was a little arrogant, she was still a girl, so she was delicate and lovable. Her colleagues and friends all knew that this daughter of his was weak and beautiful. Now that He Yin was back, her temperament was completely different from before. Not only did she wake up in the morning to practice martial arts and chop firewood, she didn't use the rouge and face powder that he bought for her in the past. She wore a plain face all day long, and even picked up a skirt to wear as if it didn't affect her work. Although this was also very good, the difference was too big. Sometimes, Hien looked at her and missed the delicate daughter of the past. Therefore, he tried to buy some small things to make Hien remember that she was a woman. Although he felt that Hien was also very good like this, General Feng Yin was marrying a wife, not marrying a brother back. Hien and Xiao Ju couldn't go out together. Outsiders would say that Hien looked more like a man than Xiao Ju. What kind of situation would that be? Hien didn't know that his actions had already distressed He Sui to such an extent. She was only concerned about Mother Qin's matter. Although he knew that blacksmith Neo would most likely not appear in Chongmao Ironworks again, there was still a trace of hope in his heart. After another 2 days, before the sun rose and He Sui and He Yunsheng left the house, Hien quietly got up in the dark, folded the bedding, and led Xiang Xiang to the town again. Therefore, when Qing Mei got up to feed the horse, she screamed like she did a few days ago. This time, she was much more mature than the last time. She didn't cry when she saw that there was no one in the house. Instead, she walked to Chi Wu's room and politely knocked on the door. Chi Wu opened the door. What's the matter? Qing Mei smiled and scolded him. Young Master Chi Wu, did you sleep too soundly? Miss took Xiang Xiang out again. Didn't you notice? Chi Wu. Chapter 214. This time, Ian went to Chongmao blacksmith shop very early. As for the chaos after she left, Chi Wu would probably appease Qing Mei. The first time was unfamiliar, the second time was familiar. Now that she knew the way, her journey would be much smoother. However, she did not expect that there would be guests at home today. When Xiao Ju arrived at the He residence, there was not a single person at home. Qing Mei was not there, Qi Wu was not there, and He Yin was definitely not there. The He residence's main door was tightly shut. It was already dilapidated and looked like an abandoned old residence that no one lived in. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei had visited once before. After returning home, Bai Rongwei tactfully asked if they should find another residence for the He family. Xiao Ju refused. Although this was not a difficult matter, with He Yan's temperament, he would probably say something like, "I don't deserve a reward for nothing." Emperor Wen Xian was also an emperor who did not eat the hardships of the world. He was given the title of Marquis, but he was not given a residence. Even his salary was suspended for a year. However, when he was in the Liang Province Guards, he had also received some silver as a reward. This silver should be enough to buy a residence for the time being. He Yan lived on a street that was surrounded by ordinary people. During the day, they all had to go out to work. It was unlike the previous night when everyone came to watch. There was no one at home. Xiao Ju pondered for a moment and was about to leave. Just as she turned around, she bumped into someone. This person saw Xiao Ju and was shocked. "Military Governor Xiao, why are you here?" It was Jiang Jiao. Jiang Jiao did not wear the robes of the new recruits today. He only wore a bamboo-colored brocade robe. Xiao Ju did not immediately recognize him. However, as soon as Jiang Jiao spoke, he secretly scolded himself. He Yan was now Xiao Ju's fiancée. It was natural for Xiao Ju to come to find her. Why was he surprised? Military Governor Xiao is here to find brother He. Miss He, right? Jiang Jiao wanted to redeem himself a little, but he looked at the tightly shut door behind him. "I just passed by here and asked a fruit vendor. He said that this is the He family. Why? Is there no one in their house today?" Xiao Ju shook her head and looked at him. "Why are you here?" "Oh, I'm here to give Miss He a sword." Jiang Jiao scratched his head. "The soldiers in the camp who live in Shuajing have one day a month to go home to visit their families. I went home yesterday, so I should return to the camp today. Before I go back, I want to give this sword to Miss He." Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows slightly. Jiang Jiao snapped out of his daze. He was afraid that Xiao Ju would misunderstand, so he explained, "It's because Miss He was assassinated in Shuajing a few days ago. Everyone in the Liangzhou Guards knows about it. My brothers are worried that something might happen to her. My family runs a martial arts club, so I wrote a letter to my father asking him to find a sword for Miss He." He weighed the long sword wrapped in cloth in his hand and seemed to be surprised. "It's not a precious sword, but it's light and sharp. Since Miss He has a sword with her, if she goes out in the future, even if she is attacked by blind assassins, she will still have a suitable weapon in her hand." "Sword?" Xiao Ju frowned. "Why would you want to give her a sword?" Jiang Jiao didn't expect Xiao Ju to ask such a question. "Miss He's swordsmanship is exquisite. If I want to give her a weapon, of course I should give her a sword. Although her whip and knife skills are good, I think her swordsmanship is better, so I chose this sword." Xiao Ju stared into his eyes. "How did you know that He Yan's swordsmanship is exquisite?" "It was when we were in the Rendezvous." Jiang Jiao suddenly understood. "All right, when Miss He used the sword, the commander-in-chief wasn't in the Rendezvous yet, so he didn't see it. Wang Ba, I, and the others all saw it. That day, Miss He led us to attack the Yudo camp. We all wore devil masks. The mask Miss He wore was different. According to Lord Li, it was exactly the same as the mask General Fei Hong wore. That day, Miss He wore the mask and pretended to be General Fei Hong to defeat the Yudo. At that time, she used a sword. Although I haven't seen General Fei Hong use a sword, I feel that Miss He's swordsmanship isn't inferior to his." Jiang Jiao finished speaking in one breath and realized that he had said too much. Although he and He Yan were friends and had nothing to do with each other, now that He Yan was Xiao Ju's fiancée, it was better to avoid arousing suspicion. Thus, he coughed lightly. "I came here today to deliver the sword. I didn't expect Miss He to be home alone. Since we met Military Governor Xiao here, why don't Military Governor Xiao give this sword to Miss He?" He handed the cloth bag in his hand to Xiao Ju. It's getting late. I have to leave the city and return to the camp. I'll have to trouble military Governor Xiao with this matter. Thank you. He cupped his hands in salute to Xiao Ju, then carried the cloth bag from home and turned to leave. Jiang Jiao's figure disappeared at the end of the long street. Xiao Ju lowered his head and looked at the long sword in his hand. The long sword was very light and looked thin and small. He lowered his eyes and seemed to have thought of something. After a while, he turned and left in another direction. That day, He Yin returned empty-handed. The old master of Chong Mao blacksmith shop told He Yin that blacksmith Neo had not appeared in the past few days. Even the 10 iron sickles that he ordered last month had not been delivered. The old master and blacksmith Neo had some friendship. Although the iron sickles were important, blacksmith Neo would not miss the appointment if there was nothing urgent. He Yin asked the old master if he knew where blacksmith Neo lived. The old master shook his head and said that blacksmith Neo lived on a barren mountain. As for the specific location, no one knew. Blacksmith Neo did not like to tell others about his family matters, so it was inconvenient for others to inquire. The matter was very clear. Blacksmith Neo and Mother Qin had most likely been found by Su Zhihing's men before she did. This was indeed a depressing business. When she returned home, He Sui and He Yunsheng had not returned because she had left early today. For the time being, they did not discover her sneaking out. On the other hand, Qin Mei was sitting on the doorstep waiting for him. When she saw He Yin leading the horse to the door, she immediately stood up happily and said, "Miss, you're finally back. I just went out for a stroll and lost track of time." He Yin continued to brush her off. "Missy went out before dawn. May I ask which market he went to?" Chi Wu walked out from behind the door and asked in an unfriendly tone. He and Qin Mei had just arrived home not long ago. To be honest, Chi Wu did not think that going out to look for them would yield any results. If He Yin wanted to hide from them, who would be able to find him? However, whenever he revealed the slightest thought that there was no need to go out to look for them, the young maidservant in front of him would immediately cry. Chi Wu almost suspected that Qin Mei was so persistent in looking for He Yin for an entire day because she wanted to go out for a stroll. It was a pity that a grown man like him had to be dragged around the streets by a young maidservant for an entire day. Xiao family's secret guards were not few in number in the capital. Who knew what rumors would spread in the 9 Flags camp tomorrow? What made him feel even more defeated was that not only did He Yin leave by himself, he even took a horse with him. It was right under his nose, yet he did not discover anything. He was even mocked by Qin Mei for his lack of skills. Who knew how He Yin managed to escape? However, He Yin was even more defeated than Chi Wu today. He left early and returned late, without any results at all. What made his heart ache even more was the money he spent bribing Fu Wang. It was not easy to find a clue, but now it was all gone. It was truly a loss of both the money and the person. She mumbled a few perfunctory words and said, "I'm a little tired after strolling around for an entire day. I'm going back to my room to rest." Without waiting for Qin Mei's reply, she went straight into her room. Qin Mei stood outside the door and blinked her eyes. She said to Chi Wu, "Imperial bodyguard Chi Wu, don't sleep too soundly today. Pay attention to the sounds coming from Mrs. Room at night." Chi Wu, now, she did not even call him young master Chi Wu and directly called him Imperial bodyguard Chi Wu. What did she mean by that? Was she telling him not to sleep at night? Hell, what a joke. At night, when the lanterns were lit, the sound of drunkards singing could be heard from the distant market. Shuo capital finally welcomed the first snow of this winter. The snowflakes were like salt floss. The wind blew in from outside the city, sending snowflakes flying everywhere. On the pomegranate tree in front of the window, the pomegranates had long been ripe and weighed heavily on the branches. It was as if they would fall off by themselves and fall into the snowy soil with just a light touch. Green tea was simmering on the stove in the room. The 4 square windows just happened to reflect the snowy scene. Someone stood in front of the window, looking at the snow outside in a daze. Although I have not seen how General Fei Hong uses a sword, I feel that Miss He's swordsmanship is not inferior to his. Jiang Jiao's words appeared in his ears again. He turned around, walked to the table, and picked up the long sword on the table. The silk cloth wrapped around the sword had already been pulled open, revealing the complete appearance of the sword. The sword was very narrow, probably to make it easier for a woman to hold. It was completely black, and the scabbard was engraved with fine patterns. It was also very light. Everyone knew that the two famous generals of Dawei, General Fengyun's autumn drinking sword and General Fei Hong's Qinglang's sword, were the sharpest weapons in the world. They could cut through gold like mud. What was more precious than their swords was their swordsmanship. The tip of the sword was sharp and had already reached perfection. When he was young, he met Hirufei. Hirufei's swordsmanship really could not be considered beautiful. Later on, he secretly taught him it was better than before. However, ever since Hirufei joined the army, he had not had the opportunity to see Hirufei use a sword. Therefore, he had only heard of Hirufei's swordsmanship. There was a thick stack of letters on the table. Xiao Ju casually picked it up and flipped through it a few times. His eyes narrowed slightly. Hirufei and Su Wanru were born at the same time on the spring equinox. Hirufei entered the Xian Chongguan when he was 14 years old. Hirufei joined the Fuyue army when he was 15 years old. Hirufei's military achievements became more and more prominent. Not long before he returned to the capital to receive his reward, the He family's second miss, Hien, also returned to the capital. Hirufei received his reward and was conferred the title of General Fei Hong. It happened almost at the same time as the He family's second miss and Su Zhiheng's engagement. The He family's second miss became Su Wanru. 3 months after Su Wanru married into the Su family, Su Wanru became blind. A year later, she lost her footing and drowned. Regarding this deceased Su Wanru, there were pitifully few things that could be found about her life. Other than marrying Su Zhiheng, she did not do anything noteworthy in the He family. It was as if she was an inconspicuous speck of dust that few people paid attention to. The only thing in her life that could be tainted with a bit of brilliance was that after returning to the capital, she had a good marriage that everyone was envious of. Unfortunately, this little bit of good fortune seemed to have used up all of her luck. After that, she became blind and died. Like a speck of dust, she returned to nothingness. Her birth and death, compared to her brother Hirufei, were like tiny pebbles thrown into the ocean, unable to cause the slightest splash. When people heard it, at most they could only sigh. A pitiful, lowly woman who no one paid any attention to. He picked up another letter. This letter was different from Su Wanru's. It was densely packed with records of all the interesting things that happened to a girl with the same name and surname since she was born. She was the daughter of He Sui, the military officer of the city gate. Although her mother died when she was young and her family was poor, she was pampered and spoiled by her father's care. She was lively, just like any other young girl who grew up in an ordinary family in a marketplace. She loved rouge, fragrant powder, and beautiful clothes. Her hands were unable to lift her shoulders, and her biggest wish was to marry into a well-off family. If this family also had an official position in their hands and a handsome husband, then she would be thankful to the heavens and earth. Her dispute with Fancheng was known to all of the neighbors. If they wanted to know about a little girl who grew up on the street, they could easily go door to door and ask about her past. It was precisely because of this that the Lady He that the neighbors spoke of and the Hien of the Marquis Wu and were like two different people. Lady He loved to be beautiful and charming, but Hien only wore men's clothes all day long. Lady He was particular about clothing and residence. Hien could even squeeze into a large bunk with a dozen or so other men. Lady He had a delicate and weak body. She would pant after taking 2 steps. Hien ran on time every day in the Liang Province Guard. She could easily throw 100 jeans stone weight. It was the same face, but her temperament was completely different. She knew how to memorize Wu Zi's art of war and knew the drill of military formations like the back of her hand. She could see the weakness of Yudo's military strategy at a glance, and she could also face the enemy's long blade without batting an eyelid. It was impossible for such a genius to exist in the world, and it was impossible for such a genius to appear in the Liang Province Guard. However, if this person wasn't a genius, but rather a valiant general who grew up in a treacherous battlefield, then it seemed that all those inexplicable things had a reasonable explanation. Xiao Ju was silent for a moment. She put all the letters in her hands back into the drawer and turned to leave. His courtyard was very large, and there were many empty rooms. Xiao Ju walked directly to the innermost room. There were guards at the door. When they saw Xiao Ju walk over, they made way for her. Xiao Ju walked in. Inside the room, Mother Qin and Blacksmith Niu were sitting on the edge of the bed, talking about something. When she saw Xiao Ju, Mother Qin was so frightened that she immediately stood up and said, "Sir." Currently, Su Zhiheng was searching everywhere for Mother Qin's whereabouts. The two brothers that he had brought back from outside the city were still in that courtyard. It would be troublesome for Mother Qin to stay there, so Xiao Ju ordered people to send them to their own courtyard. Even if Su Zhiheng had the guts as big as the sky, he wouldn't dare to go to the Xiao family to look for them. There were guards at the door, so Mother Qin couldn't escape. After Xiao Ju walked in, she didn't say anything. She only looked at Mother Qin. Mother Qin's body trembled slightly. Up until now, she still didn't know anything about this handsome young man. However, every time she looked into his eyes, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. "How did young Mistress Su die?" Xiao Ju asked. Mother Qin was stunned for a moment. Then she subconsciously replied, "Concubine mother, he killed her." "I'm asking, how did she die?" Only then did Mother Qin return to her senses. She swallowed her saliva and said, "This servant isn't too clear about what happened that day. I only know that young mistress's maidservant first gave young mistress a cup of tea with something in it. Young mistress knew martial arts, and her martial arts weren't bad. They were probably afraid that young mistress would escape. After that, young mistress couldn't move. Those servants used a stick to beat young mistress. They dragged her to the pond and pressed her head into it." As if recalling the tragic situation that day, Mother Qin felt a chill run down her spine as she spoke. Young Mistress Su died too tragically. She didn't struggle, didn't scream, didn't beg for mercy, and didn't break down like those who were on the verge of death. She only stubbornly resisted fate. She was clearly blind and couldn't see anything, but there was a fire in her eyes. She was determined, tenacious, and worked hard to resist. It was precisely because of this that when the body was pressed into the pool and gradually stopped moving and losing its breath, it was so frightening. Mother Qin closed her eyes. Young mistress drowned. However, she didn't lose her footing and drown. She was pressed into the pond and drowned alive. Xiao Ju's fingertips trembled. The past gradually appeared in front of her eyes. On the billowing smoke of the canal, there was a sea of fire. The spring water was still cold. The girl underwater was not as lively as before. Although she could swim, her body gradually stiffened. Her expression was pained. Her long hair spread out in the water like fragile glass. It was as if she would disappear in the next moment. Those who were burned by fire would avoid it when they saw it. Those who fell off their horses and got injured would never get on their horses again. As for those who died in the cold pond, when they entered the water again in the future, they would never be able to let go of the cold pond water and the despair of not being able to see the sun. So that's how it was. Mother Qin didn't know the deeper meaning behind his question. She continued to plead, "Sir, this servant really didn't participate. It was concubine he who did it. No, it was sir who ordered people to do it. This servant only stood among those servants. This servant didn't do anything." Before she could finish speaking, she saw the young man in front of her push open the door and walk out. The door was closed behind him. Xiao Ju walked forward a few steps. In the snowy night, the wind was especially cold. It blew away some of the suffocating feeling in the room. He slowly walked along the long corridor. There was no moon tonight. Under the flickering lights, the past flashed past his eyes like a lantern. Those seemingly familiar scenes finally stabbed into his heart like a sharp sword. Gradually, a sharp pain spread out. Time and space overlapped. Under the moonlight, a girl in tight clothes pulled a longbow with great effort. She didn't get tired of it. In the wilderness of the Liang province guards, she slowly blurred into a familiar figure. The masked youth clumsily swung the long sword in his hand. He fell to the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face. He sneered, "There's actually someone who works so hard and can't even withstand a single blow." The girl was covered in the smell of wine. She angrily asked, "Why would you rather like Lei Ho than me? In terms of appearance, in terms of skill, and in terms of our past relationship, I'm very disappointed." In the Xianchang dojo, the young man who stumbled when reciting great learning could now recite an entire chapter effortlessly after getting drunk. Yet, he still had to hug his father's waist and ask for his father's praise. She looked down at the recruits training on the training field. She answered his questions fluently. When she was praised, she giggled and boasted, "Sometimes I even feel like I was a female general in my last life." The highest level a liar could achieve was to hide the truth behind a seemingly unintentional lie when telling the truth. Hua Yuxian asked him with a smile, "Is the girl beside you the little girl from back then?" Was she the little girl from back then? Was she the little girl who was a complete mess of horse archery and swordsmanship, serious, stubborn, hard-working, and unsociable? Was she the one who said, "The person holding the sword in her hand should know where the tip of the sword was pointed"? Was it pointed at the enemy in front of her or the weak behind her? The little girl who said, "I will never draw my sword against the weak"? Was she the little girl who was forgotten by her classmates in the field and refused to betray them and tell them the whereabouts of her friends even when she was beaten black and blue? Was she the fierce but inexplicably pitiful young mistress, Sue, who tried to kill herself a second time after failing to do so, after Yuhua Temple and on Snow Lotus Mountain? At that time, he held an umbrella for her, gave her a candy, and gave her a non-existent moonlight. However, he did not know that she lived such a miserable life. She was so miserable that she could not even have her real name. On moonless nights, she hid behind a mask and spent many years alone and lowly. He saved her once, but he could not save her a second time. At the Water God Festival in Jiang, Hian's face was hidden under the legendary liar mask that was said to be punished for lying. He told 10 secrets and 10 truths. "I was fated to be with the governor in my last life. I was a female general in my last life. So that was it. So that was it." He raised his head. The sky was dark. Tonight, there was no moon as bright as frost. The wind was as clear as water, and the scenery was endless. Tonight was so cold. He had only lied to her once, but she had lied to him for many years. When a lie was exposed, his heart ached. Xiaoju walked very slowly. She walked to the end of the long corridor, in front of the study, and under the pomegranate tree under the flower wall. There seemed to be a girl smiling like a flower, trying to reach out and pick the pomegranate that was still young. Again and again, her back view gradually overlapped with that of a spring day many years ago. He was on the tree, and she was under the tree. The mask covered the little girl's face firmly, only revealing a pair of bright eyes and a comical posture of her trying her best to pounce on the yellow loquat. The white-robed young man landed lightly on the ground. He looked at the thin and short girl in front of him, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. That day, the spring breeze was warm, the sky was blue, and the water was blue. It was just like the first time they met. Someone's voice sounded in the sky, in the wilderness by the spring water. It carried an indescribable sense of loss, and scattered in the night wind with countless fireflies in the depths of the dense forest. Sometimes, after being someone's substitute for so long, it's hard to avoid forgetting who you are. "Governor, you must remember my name. My name is..." The young man's beautiful and clear eyes gradually darkened. He lowered his eyes and looked at the sachet that was tightly held in his hand. He softly said 2 words. "Hien." Chapter 2:15. It snowed the entire night. When they woke up the next morning, the courtyard was covered in a layer of silver frost. Qing Mei woke up early to make porridge. Before cooking, she took a look to see if there was anyone in Hien's room. Seeing that Hien was putting on his clothes, she asked curiously, "Miss, why are you up so early? It's cold. Why don't you sleep a little longer?" "It's fine." Hien stretched. "I'm used to it." In the Liang province guards, he had to wake up early every day. After returning to the capital, It was not easy to change this habit. While Ching Mei was cooking porridge, Hien picked up the broom in the corner of the courtyard to sweep the snow. Miss, put it down. How can you do this? This servant can do it, Ching Mei said in a panic. Hien smiled. You still want to cook porridge? How can one person do two things? Forget it. It's just sweeping the snow. I did much more difficult things than this when I was in the guard station. Don't worry about it. Ching Mei was very insistent. No, Mississippi. Take the stove and sit in the room. This servant can do it. It's really fine. Chi Wu, who was squatting in the corner, suddenly felt very uncomfortable. Although he was ordered to protect Hien, the He family was very poor. They only had one servant, Ching Mei. Now that the young miss and the servant girl were fighting to sweep the snow, it was very difficult for a man like him to pretend that he did not see. After hesitating for a moment, Chi Wu stood up and said, I'll do it. Before Hien could say anything, Ching Mei's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled and stuffed the broom into Chi Wu's hands. Then I'll have to thank guard Chi Wu. Chi Wu, he suspected that this servant girl was waiting for him here. Hien was a bit embarrassed. Chi Wu was a talent in the Nine Banners camp. He usually followed Xiao Ju around, so he probably had never done something like sweeping. If a sword-wielding imperial bodyguard was a servant, it would seem that the He family was bullying him. Hien said, Forget it. Let me do it. It's fine. Ching Mei giggled. Imperial bodyguard Chi Wu is very good and strong. Miss, your body is not good, so you'll be fine after some rest. Chi Wu thought to himself, this servant girl probably didn't see how our young miss lifted a 100-pound boulder by herself in the Liang Province Guard. However, since there were two women here, it was better for him to do the work of sweeping the snow. If it in, of the corners. After Chi Wu finished sweeping the snow and Ching Mei finished cooking the porridge, the three of them ate together at the table. He Sui and He Yunsheng had left early. Ching Mei had made pancakes the night before for them to take with them. After eating, Hien sat in the room in a daze. She wanted to go to the Su family to find Fu Wang, but when she opened the drawer, there was not a single banknote inside. She couldn't help but feel sad. If she had known earlier, she would have borrowed the stack of banknotes from Xiao Ju when she was in the Xiao family. But now, with her status, she was embarrassed to borrow it. How about she go find Lin Shuanghe? While she was worrying about the banknotes, a gray-feathered pigeon flew into Chi Wu's storage room. It stopped on the beam and looked at him with its beady eyes. Chi Wu opened his hand, and the pigeon flew into it. There was a small copper pipe tied to the pigeon's leg. Chi Wu untied the copper pipe and took out a piece of paper from it. After he finished reading the paper, there was a puzzled expression in his eyes. After a while, he sorted out the paper and released the pigeon. He walked to Hien's room and knocked on the door. Hien opened the door and saw Chi Wu. He asked, What's wrong? The scabbard of young master's autumn drinking sword cracked when he fought the Wutong people in Jiang. Chi Wu said, The autumn drinking sword was forged by the master swordsmith, Lu Daichuan. The autumn drinking sword is now being forged by Master Lu. Hien nodded. He didn't understand what Chi Wu's words had to do with her. Young master went out of the city to retrieve the sword today. Young master went out of the city, and I also have to go out, so I can't go and retrieve the sword. Master Lu has a rule. He won't wait for people who are late. If he misses this day, he will have to wait for 100 days before he can come out again. Besides the sword owner, only the person closest to him will go to retrieve the sword. Hien was speechless. That's a bit too strict. However, all capable craftsmen in the world more or less had their own temperament. Since Lu Daichuan could forge a precious weapon like the autumn drinking sword, it was understandable that he had such a quirk. Miss He, Chi Wu looked at her and said, You are now the governor's fiancée. Master Lu will agree to let you retrieve the sword. Therefore, Miss He, can you do young master a favor and retrieve the sword for Master Lu? Hien said, It's not difficult. But how can I prove that I am the governor's fiancé? Don't you have young master's snake-patterned black jade? Chi Wu answered, You can use that. Hien untied the black jade from her waist. Can this prove your young master's identity? Chi Wu said, Yes. Then if I use this to go to the bank, can I get some money? Chi Wu said, Miss He, If you lack money, you can tell me. Young master won't stand by and do nothing. Ian laughed and said, I'm just joking. However, she secretly understood that this black jade could be used anywhere. It shouldn't be difficult to exchange it for some money. She simply said, okay, it's not a big deal. Give me Master Lu's residence. I'll go there in a moment. Master Lu lives in the mountains north of the city. It's a bit far away, Chi Wu said. I will prepare a carriage and bodyguard for Miss He to avoid danger on the way. Ian said, forget it. Your bodyguards can't even beat me. If we really encounter danger, it's hard to say who will save who. Just give me his residence. It's broad daylight, so it won't be a problem. Moreover, after the assassin incident, the number of guards in the city has doubled. It won't be a problem. She was stubborn. Chi Wu couldn't win against her and had to give up in the end. Chi Wu seemed to have something important to do. After writing down Lu Daichuan's residence for He Yin, she hurried out of the mansion. He Yin comforted Qing Mei and led Xiang Xiang out the door. Although Lu Daichuan's residence was far away, it wasn't difficult to find. It was winter in the mountains north of the city. The snow was thicker than the snow in the city. Everywhere was silvery white. If the carriage traveled in the mountains, it would take a day and a night. He Yin was glad that he didn't listen to Chi Wu's advice to take a carriage. Instead, he rode a horse. At least he could catch up with Master Lu before sunset. Lu Daichuan was also a wonderful person. He Yin had thought that since he lived in the mountains, he must be a sage-like master. Who knew that this man had built a palace-like residence in the mountains, which was extremely gorgeous. As soon as He Yin entered, 2 giant tigers ran over and growled at her. Xiang Xiang jumped in fright and almost threw He Yin off. He Yin held onto the reins and comforted Xiang Xiang. When he got off the horse to take a look, he found that the 2 tigers were actually made of wood. Their eyes were black gems with green light, shining brightly in the dark. At first glance, they looked exactly the same as the real thing. He Yin was surprised. This was probably Lu Daichuan's work. He was indeed a skilled craftsman. The door wasn't closed. The 2 giant tigers were still growling at He Yin, but they didn't do anything else. He Yin thought for a while and pushed the door open to enter. As soon as he entered, he felt that this place was like a smaller version of Dawei. In the courtyard of the northern lands, there was a small canal that looked like a river town in Jiangnan. Inside the canal, there was a small boat that could only fit 1 person. There was even a gauze curtain on the boat, and moving music could be heard from it. Upon closer inspection, there was no one in the boat, only a wooden box. The flowers and plants on the wall were fake, but they were lifelike. Even though it was winter, it was lively and bustling. Some colorful stones were scattered on the ground. They shouldn't be gems, but they were shining and attracting people's attention. He Yin felt as if she had entered the legendary Dragon Palace. It was as if she had entered a fairyland. She couldn't help but sigh in admiration. This person was such a skilled craftsman. No wonder he could forge a sword like autumn wine. She had just walked to the main hall when the door opened with a crash. He Yin walked in and saw a man in a white robe sitting in the large hall. This man was cutting a bamboo dragonfly. He was probably at the last step. He Yin watched as he pulled the tail of the dragonfly, and the dragonfly flew up on its own with a wong 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 sound. She couldn't help but cry out in surprise. The man turned his head, and He Yin saw his face clearly. In fact, this man was dressed like an immortal. She didn't know what material his white robe was made of. It was especially light and elegant. Just by looking at his appearance, he looked like a hermit from the previous dynasty. However, his appearance was completely different. This person was very round. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was like a round ball. When he looked over with a smile, he looked like a Mithriya Buddha. He didn't have the air of a high scholar. This was somewhat beyond He Yin's expectation. She thought she would see a cold, arrogant, and eccentric old man with a white beard. She didn't expect to see such a kind fat man. Moreover, this person looked very young, probably in his 20s. It was a young fat man. We have a guest. The man smiled. Are you Master Lu? Ian took off the jade pendant from her waist and showed it to him. I'm here to get the sword from Military Governor Xiao. Lu Daichuan saw He Yin's jade pendant and was stunned. Why do you have Xiao Huaijin's sword? Are you Xiao Ju's fiancé? Heian was caught off guard by the question and didn't know how to answer for a moment. After a while, she nodded. That's right. So you are Huijin's fiancé. Lu Daichuan nodded and looked at Heian again. Not bad, not bad. Heian felt inexplicably uncomfortable. She thought for a while and asked, Master Lu seems to have a good personal relationship with Military Governor Xiao. This person looked amiable. He wasn't as unreasonable as Chi Wu said. It's not good, but it's also not bad. Lu Daichuan shook his head with a smile and clapped his hands. With a creak, Heian looked in the direction of the sound and found a small wooden figure standing in the hall. It was only 1 foot tall and made into a beautiful woman. It walked into the hall. She didn't know what it was going to do. This is all made by Master Lu? Just some puppets. Lu Daichuan smiled. There are no living people in my villa. There are only puppets who help me work. It sounded a little scary, but Heian didn't feel scared. She said, Why don't you ask some craftsmen to help you? Or we just go down the mountain. That won't do. Lu Daichuan said, I have lived on the mountain for more than 30 years. The life below the mountain doesn't suit me. Heian asked, Master, how old are you this year? This person looked like he was in his 20s. How could he have lived on the mountain for more than 30 years? Guess. Heian couldn't guess. She simply said, Master, you look like you are in your early 20s. Her words seemed to please Lu Daichuan. He held his stomach and laughed. Child, your mouth is as sweet as honey. No wonder Xiao Huijin likes you. You are so likable. Heian, just as she was wondering why this master swordsmith looked so frivolous, the wooden figure that had just entered the room ran out again with a da-da-da sound. He held a long box in his hands and placed it in front of Heian. Heian opened the box and saw a long sword lying in it. The blade was as white as snow. It was autumn wine. It's already fixed? Heian said in surprise. There were no traces of cracks on the scabbard. It's just a sword. It won't take long. Lu Daichuan looked at Heian and smiled kindly. You are Xiao Huijin's fiancé. For Xiao Huijin's sake, I can also make a weapon or treasure for you. What do you want? Heian joked. Master, can you also make a sword like autumn wine for me? Lu Daichuan looked at her and smiled. No. Why? Heian asked with a smile. Master, do you think I don't deserve your sword? You already have a sword. You don't need another one. Heian's smile suddenly froze. She looked at Lu Daichuan. How did this man know she had a sword? Master, I don't have a sword. Heian said, I don't even have a good weapon. You will. Lu Daichuan shook his head. The smile in his eyes seemed to see through her. Your sword will come back to you again. Heian stared at Lu Daichuan, trying to find any flaws on his face. Unfortunately, he could not see anything other than the amiable and consistent smile on this person's face. Heian hugged the box containing autumn wine and stood up. Grandmaster, it's getting late. I came here today to retrieve the sword. Now that I have the sword, I should go back. She bowed to Lu Daichuan. Thank you, Master. You're welcome. Lu Daichuan also stood up. It was not easy for him to stand up because he was fat. It took him a lot of strength to stand firmly like a ball. He clasped his hands and sent Heian to the door. Beside him were the 2 colorful tigers and the wooden figure. He looked like a weird king hiding in the mountains. Let's go. Heian got on his horse and turned around to leave. However, from the view of his back, it seemed as if he was fleeing in panic. The sound of the horse's hooves gradually faded away. Lu Daichuan made a tut sound and looked down at the wooden figure that only reached his calf. Jade, do you think I scared the little girl? The wooden figure hung on his leg and didn't say anything. Forget it. Lu Daichuan shook his head again. He turned around and walked back. As he walked, he said to himself, Huijin, this is all I can do for you. It was getting dark on the mountain. When Heian came, the sun hadn't set yet. She didn't stay long in Master Lu's bun, but when she came out, it was already dark. Fortunately, the moonlight was bright tonight. It shone on the snowy mountain, making it brighter than usual. She remembered the way. She rode xiang down the mountain, but she kept thinking about what she had just said to Master Lu. How did Master Lu know that she already had a treasured sword? Did he already know something? Or was this person really some kind of otherworldly expert who could see the truth of her reincarnation in someone else's body. But she was alone now and knew nothing about Lu Daichuan. She had to wait until she met Xiao Ju and asked him who Lu Daichuan was. Then she would make a decision. He sighed in his heart. He had just solved the problem of Lady He, who had disguised herself as a man and joined the Liangzhou guards. Now there was another problem. These days, it seemed like he was solving one problem after another. He gaze fell on the wooden box in front of him. Fortunately, he had finally retrieved the autumn drinking sword. She didn't know where He Rufei had put her Qinglang. Given He Rufei's cautiousness, he wouldn't show anyone the Qinglang unless he had no other choice. If her Qinglang was still by her side, she would definitely clean it every day. The horse galloped through the mountain. The cold wind that blew against her face cut painfully. She exhaled, and her breath immediately turned into white mist under the night sky. It was extremely cold in the mountain. Suddenly, something flew toward him from behind. The horse under him was startled and stood up abruptly. He pulled on the reins. In the next moment, someone flew from behind him and aimed the tip of a sword at his back. An assassin. He dodged to the side and landed on the ground. Before he could see who the person was, the person had already made a comeback. He threw himself in front of He Yan and pointed the sword at He Yan's heart. He wanted He Yan's life without saying anything. In this desolate mountain range, there wasn't a single person. Even if he shouted, it would be impossible to call the city guards. And she was unarmed, so it was very troublesome. She had no choice but to use her hand to split open the wooden box that she had clamped under her armpit. With a dong sound, the wooden box shattered and the autumn drinking sword fell into He Yan's hand. Although she had seen and touched it in her previous life, this was the first time she had used it. As soon as she touched it, she felt that the sword was really cold. It was as sharp as the owner of the sword. "I'm sorry, Xiao Ju," she secretly said in her heart. "I'll borrow your sword for now." He suddenly pulled out the autumn drinking sword and looked at the person in front of him. He shouted, "Who are you?" Under the moonlight, He was able to clearly see that the other party's entire body was wrapped in a black cloak. The curtain hat covered most of his face, only revealing a little bit of his chin. In the dim light of the night, it seemed as clear as green jade. She wanted to look again, but the other person was already impatiently holding his sword and sweeping it towards He Yan's neck. He actually started to fight without saying anything. He Yan was startled, but the murderous aura in front of her made it clear that the other person wanted to kill her. It seemed that he only wanted to take her life. He Yan frowned. Could it be that He Rufei sent someone again? But last time there was a group of people. Why was there only one this time? But soon, He Yan understood why there was only one person this time. Compared to the assassins last time, this person's skills were much better. Even He Yan couldn't help but be surprised when she fought with him. His sword technique was exquisite. It looked as calm as water, but it was full of murderous aura. It was actually on par with hers. She was surprised. Where did this person come from? Even in Shuo capital, there weren't many people with such skills. He Rufei actually had such a powerful person under his command. She didn't have time to think about it. The long swords danced and made a clanging sound. He dodged the person's sword and bent her elbow towards the other person's abdomen. That person seemed to have expected her sneak attack and dodged to the side. Instead, he flashed behind He Yan and stabbed with his sword. He Yan couldn't dodge in time. She could only turn her back to that person and stab back. The two swords collided. With a pung sound, both of them took a few steps back. He Yan was startled for a moment. She didn't know why, but a familiar feeling welled up in her heart. She didn't know where this familiar feeling came from, but before she could figure it out, that person had already stabbed with his sword again. The other person's movements were extremely fast. After each exchange, there wasn't any time to rest as he continued to attack again. The sword moves were like a storm, fine and dense. He Yan's autumn drinking sword was nimble and sharp. She had long been used to it. Thus, she didn't hide the flaws and habits of General Fei Hong. The snowflakes danced in the wind. In the darkness of the night, the bamboo forest seemed to have the sound of wind echoing, leisurely burying the killing intent. He Yan's foot lightly tapped the ground. The autumn drinking sword in her hand seemed to have a telepathic connection with her. She finally caught a glimpse of a flaw in the other person's sword moves. Without hesitation, her figure was as fast as lightning as she stabbed toward the other person. At the same time, that person also stabbed towards Hien. The two swords made a crisp sound as they collided in the air. The moment they passed each other, a "pa" sound rang out. A cold light broke into two. The sword in the black-clothed person's hand had been cut in two by the autumn drinking sword. Hien suddenly turned around and stabbed toward the back of that person who hadn't yet turned around. The tip of the sword was just a hair away from piercing his back. But at this tiny hair, it stopped. The surroundings were strangely quiet. There was only the sound of falling snow and the clear cry of wild cranes in the distant valley. Hien looked at the other person's back and seemed to feel something. The hand holding the sword slightly trembled. The other person didn't move. She slowly opened her mouth with a hoarse voice. "Who are you?" In an instant, the mountain and the moon broke through the dark clouds. Thousands of peaks piled up like jade and thousands of valleys paved with silver. That person slowly turned around and took off his veiled hat, revealing a familiar face. "Xiao Ju," Hien murmured. The black cloak was slightly blown by the wind in the snowy night. The youth's facial features were unbelievably handsome, like a jade carving. There seemed to be an indescribable emotion in his limpid black eyes. His gaze focused on her, as if from the past to the present, and perhaps the future. "Your swordsmanship has improved a lot." He hooked his lips. "Long time no see, General He." End of Book 5. Chapter 216. The moonlight shone on the snowy ground. In the flowing light and shadow, the two of them stood facing each other. There was no need to hide. Hien's gaze fell on the autumn drinking sword in her hand. At this moment, she realized how heavy the sword was. It was so heavy that she almost couldn't hold it anymore. "When did you find out?" she asked softly. "I found Yuan Ru's wet nurse," Xiao Ju replied. Hien suddenly looked up at him. His expression was as calm as ever, as if what he said was just a trivial matter. Thousands of complex emotions surged in her heart. Bitterness, panic, nervousness, and finally, they all turned into a sigh of relief. "I'm sorry." Hien tried to make herself look more relaxed. "I didn't mean to lie to you." But why did she lie? Even she couldn't come up with an acceptable reason. Xiao Ju bent down to pick up the broken sword on the ground. The sword in his hand had been cut in two by Hien's autumn drinking sword. Hien quietly watched his movements. When he bent down and stood up, he said, "Already know everything, more or less." Xiao Ju's gaze was calm. "You are Su Zhiheng's deceased wife, and he Rufei who wears a mask." When the words "deceased wife" came out of his mouth, Hien's heart shook violently. It was as if the secret that she didn't want to be discovered had been exposed. For no reason, she looked a little embarrassed. She had been brave all her life and never feared facing thousands of troops on a battlefield. Only when she faced this person in front of her did she have the thought of retreating. But she couldn't run away. Since she had been discovered, she had to face it. No matter if it was a past full of conspiracies and schemes, or a future with no path ahead. "That's right," Hien said. "I am Hien, and he Rufei, your classmate." Xiao Ju's eyes moved slightly. After a moment, he asked, "How did you become the daughter of the military officer at the city gate? If you've already found Mother Qin, you should already know how I died." Hien smiled bitterly and looked at the icicles hanging from the trees not far away. The icicles were like teardrops hanging from the branches. "After I died, when I woke up again, I was already Hien now. Maybe God took pity on me and gave me another chance." Hien shrugged. "Even if I told you about the supernatural, no one would believe me. Maybe someone would even think that I was talking nonsense. However, since you've already found me, I think you already believe this matter. Why did you exchange identities with He Rufei?" Hien was startled. His eyes, which had always been bright, seemed to be covered by a layer of mist at this moment, giving birth to a bit of confusion. "Xiao Ju, no one could decide their own fate at birth. It's the same for me. Well, I could remember I was already He Rufei," she slowly said. "I only knew that my eldest brother wouldn't live for long. If I didn't become He Rufei, the title of nobility of the He family would be taken away. Therefore, I had to live in the name of He Ru Fei and live like this for the rest of my life. However, at that time, I was too young and didn't want to succumb to this kind of fate. Therefore, I left the He family and joined the Fuyue army. I earned military merits and received a reward. I also didn't expect that my eldest brother, who was destined to die young, didn't die and was even safe and healthy. Therefore, when I returned to the capital, everything went back to its original place. He became He Ru Fei, and I became He Yin. This was good. There was nothing bad about this. Although she felt a bit wronged at that time, this was already the best ending she could think of. Whether it was He Ru Fei or He Yin, both of them would be able to escape unscathed. He Yin slightly raised her head, as if she was trying to force back the tears. She smiled and said, He Ru Fei is the famous General Fei Hong. Second miss, he is just a sickly person with poor health. When she reached the age, she could use He Ru Fei's name to find a good marriage for herself. Originally, this matter would have ended at this point. It's just that they were afraid that I would reveal some clues and implicate the entire He family, so they didn't trust me. Therefore, after this, they took my life. He Yin laughed self-deprecatingly. This should be a punishment from the heavens for me. Those who rebelled against fate would eventually be wiped out by fate. If she had obediently stayed in the He family as He Ru Fei back then and didn't go to the battlefield, didn't strive for military achievements, and didn't become General Fei Hong, perhaps when the time came, she and He Ru Fei would return to their positions and wouldn't have lost their lives. But if someone asked if she could turn back time, and if she had the chance to choose again, would she still leave the He family? Ian thought that she probably would. It was because she had embarked on a path that was completely different from the predetermined fate that she realized that the vastness of the world, the scenery were completely different from those hidden in the four residences. Your eyes. It was the He family who blinded me. Ian interrupted him, but they probably didn't expect that I could live well without my eyes. This is all thanks to you. She smiled slightly. I will remember what you said to me that day at Yuhua Temple. Even if I become a blind person, I want to be the one who is the most different among the blind people. Xiao Ju's breathing deepened slightly. What he said was also hurting He Yin. If He Yin had become a blind person, after he no longer posed a threat to the He family, he might have been able to save his life. It was because she didn't accept her fate that the He family became uneasy again and took her life away. Xiao Ju, please don't blame yourself. Ian seemed to have seen through her thoughts. I don't regret my choice at that time. If I didn't meet you, I wouldn't even have the courage to live. As early as the mid-autumn night at Yuhua Temple, there should be no Hien in this world. Fate was cruel, but it was also mysterious. Every seemingly careless choice would lead to unpredictable results. Now that she had become He Sui's daughter, she was no longer blind. Old friends appeared in front of her one by one. She couldn't tell if she felt more regretful or more fortunate. I am Hien, and I am also He Ru Fei. She smiled slightly. When I first woke up, I accidentally stumbled into the recruit camp of the Liang Province Guards. When I told you that I want to make a name for myself, I wasn't lying. Because only by standing at the same height as He Ru Fei can I expose his lies. My life alone is not important, but because of me, He Ru Fei caused the deaths of many innocent people. This is unforgivable. What he owes me, I will take it back myself. Now that I have become Marquis Wuan, I have the ability to fight against him. What I'm going to do next is also these things. I'm sorry, Xiao Ju, I didn't mean to lie to you. It's just that there are some things that are too ridiculous to say. Maybe it's because I'm too timid and don't know how to face you. You've been lying to me, he said. Hian's fingers curled up slightly, and he took a deep breath. I'm sorry. Are you also lying to me about liking me? He asked. Hian suddenly raised his head. He stood in the wind, his posture tall and straight, just like in the past. Yet, he also seemed to have returned to the beginning, a distance that could never be touched. No. Xiao Ju looked at him indifferently. I didn't lie to you. Hian paused, swallowed the sourness in his throat, and then continued. When I was He Ru Fei in the Xianchang dojo, you took care of me a lot. You helped me apply medicine and taught me swordsmanship. In this life, when I was He Yin, you always protected me. You always appeared when I was in danger. Xiaoju, I used to like you, and now I like you even more. Some things, once said, were said. It was as if all of his worries were gone. Ian knew very well that Xiaoju was someone who hated betrayals and lies. This was related to the Xiao family's accident. Thus, when he found out that she was pretending to be a man in the Liang province guards, he was also this sensitive. And now, an even bigger secret had been exposed. To Xiaoju, from the moment they met, it had been a complete lie. She had no right to ask for Xiaoju's forgiveness. I'm not the real Lady He. She took a deep breath and revealed a fake relaxed smile. I really didn't want to drag you into this. Originally, I just wanted to make a name for myself in the Liang province guards and be your right-hand man. I didn't think that things would come to this between you and me. His Majesty bestowed a marriage upon the two of us, and I can't go against it, but, she looked at Xiaoju. You don't have to take this marriage to heart. Just treat it as a partnership. If you find a girl you like in the future, I will tell her that you and I are just putting on a show. When the time comes, you can cancel the marriage or divorce me. It doesn't matter. Xiaoju's eyes suddenly turned cold, and she slowly asked, divorce you? Ian pretended to be indifferent and sighed. Actually, marriage doesn't mean anything, really. Don't look at how happy Yin Nong Wang is and think that there are many benefits to marriage. I've been married before, and if we talk about it, I was happier before I got married. Perhaps I am more suitable to be alone. 2 marriages are not good enough. She joked, wait until you divorce me, and I have settled all the debt of gratitude and enmity. Then 1 man, 1 horse, I will roam the Jianghu. It's better than living the life of an ordinary woman in this courtyard house. Not very good. It's just a pity for you. She seemed to be genuinely worried for Xiaoju. Everything was fine, but I've blocked your marriage for no reason. Xiaoju coldly said, Hien, don't look so angry. Hien laughed. The one who should be sad is me. It wasn't easy to deceive a marriage, but now it's been exposed. Fortunately, I'm a very broad-minded person, and I'm always open-minded about everything. After today, you and I will be ordinary schoolmates. Xiaoju, she said seriously, pausing between each word, thank you, no matter if it was in the past or now. Her smile was relaxed, and she looked like she didn't care at all, like a heartless youth in the Liang province guards. However, only Hien knew that when she said these words, every word was like a knife cutting in her heart. She liked this person so much and had experienced so much with this person. Xiaoju had given her warmth and treasures that she had never experienced before. She thought that she had caught the moon, but in reality, she had only caught the reflection of the moon under the water. Now that she had woken up from her dream, she should return to her own path. Greed was a taboo in a relationship. If she didn't have that bit of greed, perhaps she wouldn't have been so sad when they parted. Hien raised a big smile, thought for a moment, and reached out to Xiaoju. Here, this is your autumn wine, and now it's returned to its rightful owner. The youth didn't move, and his beautiful eyes focused on her, surging with an emotion that Hien couldn't understand. In the next moment, he strode forward, and Hien handed the autumn wine back to him. He didn't take the sword. That hand grabbed Hien's arm, and with a gentle tug, pulled her into an embrace. Hien was shocked. Under the seemingly cold black robe, there was an incomparably warm embrace. Just like the most valiant general, he had the softest heart. Xiaoju, Hien leaned into his embrace and could hear the other person's clear and powerful heartbeat. It was more intense than any other heartbeat, as if it was a declaration of the youth's unknown feelings. She raised her head and saw Xiaoju's chin. Hien's hand was supporting Hien's waist, and he pressed her head against his chest, as if he was comforting her, but also as if he was afraid that she would escape from his imprisonment. I'm sorry. What? The youth's voice was restrained, hoarse and deep. I didn't recognize you at first sight. In an instant, Hien's eyes were wet. For a long time, it was as if she had walked alone in the dark for a long time. No one had discovered her existence, and no one cared about her sadness or joy. No one apologized, and no one cheered. Happiness or sadness, beginning or ending, it was all her story. Until one day, someone discovered her. The only person in the world was her light, the source of all her brilliance. Hey, she wanted to lighten the atmosphere. Xiao Huaijin, I can't bear to see you like this. He hugged Tian even tighter and whispered in her ear, I missed you twice. This time, I won't miss you again. Tian was stunned. She broke free from Xiao Ju's embrace and looked at him in surprise. I'm not Lady He. I'm He Yin. I know. I've lied to you. From your previous life until now. I know. I've already been married. She seemed to find it hard to say. Xiao Ju, even if that's the case, are you still the same as before? She didn't think that people who had been married were inferior. There were so many women in the world who had divorced, and those who had been abandoned were no worse than others. It was just that they were unlucky, or they had no choice but to choose the wrong marriage. It didn't prevent them from obtaining happiness. But it turned out that when people met the person they really liked, even if it was a fairy, they would secretly worry about whether they matched the other party. Happiness made people timid, and timidity made people feel inferior. Moreover, she had received too little love, and even the affirmation was very little. Under the night sky, the youth's eyes were like limpid autumn water, and all the coldness and ridicule had faded away. It was unbelievably warm. Xiao Ju smiled. Why are you so unconfident? Even if you've been married, in my eyes, you're just a girl. He leaned over slightly, looking into her eyes. So what if I'm General Fei Hong? I'm only here for He Yin. Chapter 217. It was unknown when Xiang had sneaked back. She stood under the tree and watched them quietly. He Yin looked at him blankly. Is what you said true? I see that your swordsmanship has improved a lot. Why are you still the same as before? He said lazily, stupid and short. These words seemed to have pulled He Yin back to the past, and the embarrassment and sorry state he was in earlier had unknowingly dissipated greatly. There seemed to be a surge of warmth in her heart, and all of her uneasiness turned to ashes at this moment. She raised her head, unable to hide her smile. But you are exactly the same as you were back then. Xiao Ju coughed and turned her head. He Yin was excited and didn't want to let him go. He grabbed his sleeves and didn't let go. He tilted his head and asked, My sword skills were taught by you personally, but I was still dressed as a man. Why did you take care of me? Could it be that you already liked me at that time? These words were really shameless. Xiao Ju sneered. I'm not a homosexual, but you look like a homosexual. He Yin suddenly understood. No wonder Yin Nongguang always disliked me at that time. He probably thought that I was some kind of male seductress who tarnished the only genius he saw as a rival. Xiao Ju stared at her in disbelief. You are not sad now. I was not sad in the first place. He Yin said stubbornly. You were about to cry just now. He raised his eyebrows. You can't bear to part with me? He Yin could not keep her face. She retorted. How could I cry? You saw wrong. Of course, I can't bear to part with you. We were schoolmates after all. Just the friendship of schoolmates. He Yin ignored her. She leaned closer to him and said, Don't change the topic. Tell me first, why did you teach me swordsmanship at the Xian Chong dojo? You are not someone who likes to help others. You must have fallen in love with me at that time. Xiao Huaijin, could it be that you are really a homosexual? Xiao Ju's face darkened as she reprimanded. Nonsense. Then tell me why. He Yin had wanted to ask him this question for a long time. At that time, he and Xiao Ju did not have a close relationship, but Xiao Ju was willing to teach him swordsmanship on the last night of the Virtuous Prosperity Dojo. It was no wonder that he could not figure it out. Even Xiao Ju herself did not understand. Xiao Ju smiled. Do you still remember the winter solstice competition at the Eastern Mountain hunting ground in the capital when we first entered the Virtuous Dojo? He Yin was stunned. I remember. What's wrong? She still remembered that it was at that time when she first saw Shun Muxue in her previous life. When the cold and aloof young Miss Shun and the handsome second young master, Xiao, stood together. They looked like a match made in heaven, even from the perspective of this lifetime. He Yin muttered, At that time, His Majesty personally came to the hunting ground. All the students in the Virtuous Prosperity Dojo had to enter the competition. The students who caught the most prey would be rewarded. The students who did not catch any prey would not be able to eat. Who came up with this idea? The weather was cold, and the ground was frozen. It was normal that they did not catch any prey. How could they be so harsh on the students and let them starve? Speaking of this, she was still indignant. There was no other reason than He Yin was the one who did not catch any prey and went hungry. Xiao Ju chuckled. Wasn't that your choice? What? You clearly caught a rabbit, but you let it go. She turned her head and looked at He Yin. Wasn't that your choice? He Yin was stunned. He stammered. How did you know? Because Xiao Ju curved her lips. That was a rabbit. I'll let it go. At that time, it was winter in Shuajing. The hunting ground was completely covered in white snow. At that time, the Xiao family was not in trouble. Su Jingfu was not at the stage where he could cover the sky with one hand. Emperor Wen Xian had a sudden impulse and personally came to Dong Mountain to watch the students of the Virtuous Prosperity Dojo compete. Originally, it was just a competition in archery and horse riding. Because of the arrival of the emperor, there were more prizes. In order to make the youths work harder and not lose face for the Virtuous Prosperity Dojo, some genius teacher in the dojo came up with a harsh rule. If they did not catch any prey, they would not be able to eat. He cursed the person who came up with this idea in his heart. She was not very good at martial arts. Her horsemanship and archery were even worse. Being together with these youngsters, he really had no advantage. Without a doubt, once they entered the hunting grounds, unlike his classmates who were in high spirits, He Yin was simply especially helpless. At that time, Xiao Ju was, without a doubt, the most eye-catching of all the youths. The horse was wearing a marten coat and looked beautiful. In a flash, there was a long string of prey tied behind the horse. Lin Shuanghe was a weak young master who could not lift or carry anything. He followed Xiao Ju closely and gained a lot of benefits. It did not matter if there was prey or not. In the end, if he could get one or two from Xiao Ju's prey, it would be enough to complete his task. The two walked in the forest of the hunting ground. Suddenly, not far away, they saw a gray arrow flying from the side. It accurately hit a piece of Shirtu. The two paused for a moment. Soon, a short figure ran out from the forest. She ran to the side of the Shirtu and pulled out the arrow. After looking at it, she simply sat on the ground and sighed. She said to herself, "Hunting is difficult. It's harder than ascending to the blue sky." Xiao Ju and Lin Shuanghe, they all recognized that the masked man who was moaning and groaning was young Master He from the bottom of the Virtuous Prosperity Hall. Lin Shuanghe had previously improved together with He Yin. He already felt some sympathy for He Yin. Seeing this scene, he said, "My brother, he is too pitiful." Xiao Ju looked on coldly from the sidelines, unmoved. In his opinion, this young master of the He clan was often mentally ill most of the time. You see, there is not a single prey on his horse. When he goes back, he won't have anything to eat. He will be hungry. In this cold winter, it's not good to be hungry. Lin Shuanghe was a doctor with the heart of a parent. He said mercifully, "How about we give him a badger so that he won't be empty-handed?" Xiao Ju sneered. "You go by yourself." Lin Shuanghe really walked in front of Xiao Ju's horse. He picked the prey tied to the back of the horse. But halfway through, he suddenly realized, no, He Rufei can't do anything. However, he is extremely stubborn. If we give it to him like this, he will most likely not agree. He will even righteously refuse. Just like how he proposed to let He Rufei be the last in the exam, so that he could strive to be the second last. This young master was extremely principled. Money would not be able to move him. Lin Shuanghe thought that he had a good eye for people. He Rufei would most likely not accept such a straightforward help. How about this? Lin Shuanghe had an idea. "Huaijin, your archery skills are very good. Later, you'll shoot a rabbit and let He Rufei pass by. An injured rabbit can't run fast. If He Rufei can't hit it, then he really has a mental problem. What does that have to do with me?" Xiao Ju frowned. "I'm not going. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. Look at this boy. He is too pitiful. We are all classmates. It's just a matter of convenience." Huaijin, Lin Shuanghe was a person who was especially patient when it came to trivial matters. He also knew that Xiao Ju was the most impatient person. Sure enough, after nagging for a while, Xiao Ju was annoyed. He picked up the bow on his horse and shot an arrow in a direction. From the bushes, a gray rabbit suddenly jumped out. The arrow was shot very coincidentally. It did not hit the rabbit and just grazed one of its legs. Thus, the rabbit's movement slowed down. The arrow fell into the bushes and no one noticed. Ian was leaning on the shirt too and sighing. Suddenly, he saw a rabbit jump out of the forest. He was first shocked, then became happy. Without saying anything, he grabbed his bow and followed it. He didn't know what was wrong with this wild rabbit, but its movements were much slower than the ones they encountered before. Ian guessed that it might be because the winter was too cold, and even the rabbits became less agile. But this was also a good thing. The fast rabbit couldn't be caught, but the slow one couldn't fly away, right? Lin Shuanghe praised Xiao Ju in a low voice. Huaijin, your help was flawless. This boy must think that he got a good deal. Let's go and take a look. He pulled the unwilling Xiao Ju and secretly followed behind Ian. The rabbit ran for a while. It seemed that it did not have enough strength and became slower. Ian thought for a while and put the bow and arrow on his back. He felt that even if he did not use the bow and arrow, the rabbit would most likely not be able to run on its own. He could catch it with his bare hands. In ancient times, there was a saying that one would wait for a rabbit to pass out. Ian applauded himself in his heart. He actually still had the time to carefully observe the rabbit. This rabbit was very thin. Perhaps it was hungry because there was no food in the winter. It looked like even if it was fried, it would not have much meat. Lin Shuanghe's imagination ran wild. She did not know if the prey she hunted could be shared with the students. However, if she brought this rabbit back to the He family, it would not even be enough for the whole family. Not long after, the rabbit stopped. It pulled open a bush and revealed a hole. Ian's eyes were sharp and his hand were fast. Before it could go in, he grabbed the rabbit by the ear and lifted it up. He said to himself, "Everyone says that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. The ancient people did not lie to me." At this moment, something seemed to be moving at the entrance of the cave. Ian held the rabbit in one hand and curiously pried open the grass with the other. Inside the small cave, there were 3 small furry buns. They looked like 3 yuan shao, and they were huddled together. It was actually 3 baby rabbits. Ian was stunned. She looked at the gray rabbit in her hand that was constantly kicking and struggling. She suddenly realized that this was a female rabbit. The rabbits in the hole were her cubs. Ian became silent. Lin Shuanghe was holding the Xiao Ju to watch the show from afar. When he saw this, he was pleasantly surprised. He Rufei's luck is not bad. He actually found a rabbit nest. If he turns in this nest of rabbits, I think this time he won't be the last. He will at least be the second last. But why is he holding the rabbit in a daze? The rabbit under her hand jumped silently. Ian looked at the 3 sesame yuan shao in the hole. After a while, she sighed and took out a small white bottle. He. What is he doing? Lin Shuanghe was very surprised. The boy called He Rufei was grabbing the rabbit's ear and applying medicine for it. He even tore a piece of cloth from his robe to bandage the rabbit's leg that was grazed by the arrow. She said while bandaging, "Forget it. Who told you to meet me? I'm a good person. I can't do something like separating a mother and child. I will let you go." She complained endlessly. "Brats, you must remember that because of you, I have to go hungry today." Ian's movements were very fast. In just a moment, she finished bandaging the rabbit. She put the gray rabbit in her hand at the hole and let go of her hand. The rabbit was freed and rushed back into the hole with a whoosh. "You didn't even say thank you?" Ian sighed. Public morals are degenerating day by day. Although she said that, she still spread out the shirt too near the hole to avoid being discovered by other animals. Lin Shuanghe was stunned. Is he Rufei's brain okay? Is he here to hunt or to set animals free? Why is he showing mercy at this time? Why is he acting like a girl? Is he sympathizing with the rabbit? He turned to look at Xiao Ju. Huaijin, look. Xiao Ju's gaze fell on the boy wearing the mask. He didn't know why, but he suddenly remembered something when he was young. That was before he left the mountain. He learned martial arts from a master on the mountain. The master was very strict. If he failed a mission or did not do well, the punishment was very severe. It was very difficult to endure. When he was on the mountain, there was one time where he tested his archery skills. At that time, Xiao Ju caught a deer. This deer was very fat. When it ran away, it was not as agile as other deer. He caught the deer. When he was about to raise his knife, the deer knelt down in front of him. This was a pregnant doe. At that time, he was 12 or 13 years old. He was not as cold and heartless as he was later. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but feel sympathy. His master stood by the waterfall and looked at him. You can't be soft-hearted. The boy stood in place and looked at the doe with tears in its eyes. He thought for a moment, then knelt down. In front of his master, he removed the rope on the doe and watched it escape into the forest. His master was not angry. He only looked at him and said, "Do you know what you're doing? You shouldn't be soft-hearted. I just want to protect what I want to protect." The boy's robe was as white as snow. He calmly replied. He was punished to break the array in the mountain for 3 months. Xiao Ju did not regret it. When he was young, he simply thought that he did not want this doe to die. But now he saw Irufei here, carefully bandaging the wound of a wild rabbit. This was not soft-heartedness, nor was it hypocrisy. He suddenly understood what he wanted to protect all those years ago. A heart of compassion for the weak. When a person wants to become strong, it is to protect the people they want to protect. If in order to become strong, you lose your heart, it is no different from putting the cart before the horse. Huaijin, I think Irufei really has a problem with his brain. If he was a man, he could be my sister. Lin Shuanghe was still rambling on. The white-robed boy was stunned for a moment. He lowered his head and pulled the corners of his mouth, smiling to himself. That day, Irufei really did not catch anything. He was also the only boy in the Xianchang dojo who did not catch any prey. It was also the second day after that day that Xiao Ju got up in the night and walked to the courtyard behind the bamboo forest. He watched the clumsy boy wearing a mask diligently and painstakingly practicing. From then on, his ill-fated relationship with the last place began. Yin was stunned. He never thought that he and Xiao Ju had such an unknown past. At that time, Xiao Ju's arrow was hidden very well. She did not realize that the rabbit with an injured leg was caused by Xiao Ju. She only saw that the rabbit was pitiful and felt compassion for it. She did not expect that Xiao Ju would be moved by this. You were moved by my kindness? Yin shuddered. Hearing this, he could not help but feel goosebumps. Xiao Ju seemed to be speechless. It's not kindness. It's just that at that time, Xiao Ju saw a shadow of her own past in Irufei. Yin was happy. So that's how it is. So when you were classmates, you already paid attention to me? Then why did you pretend to be indifferent? Once this person started to be heartless, it was really hard to deal with. Xiao Ju changed the topic. It's not early anymore. You haven't returned home yet. Your father and brother must be worried. That's true. Yin came back to his senses. Seeing that it was already late at night, he guessed that He Sui and He Yunsheng should be home by now. They might be looking for him again. Afraid that they would be worried, Yin said, "Then let's go back first." Xiao Ju whistled. Green Ear ran out of the forest and stopped in front of Xiao Ju. Yin also flipped on his Xiang's back. The two of them trotted down the mountain. Yin rode on his horse. As he galloped, he gradually came back to his senses. He said, "Xiao Ju, you asked Chi Wu to ask me to retrieve the sword just to test me? You've been following me all this time?" There was no trace of guilt on this person's face. He replied slowly, "This is unbelievable. Of course, I have to confirm it. You wanted to force me to use the sword. You actually beat around the bush." Yin thought for a moment. But what's up with that master Lu Daichuan? When I went to his villa, he seemed to know something. He even said that I already had a sword and couldn't have another one. Did you tell him about this? No. Xiao Ju's eyes flickered. Other than you and me, no one else knows about this. Then, even if he knows something, it's not strange. He's my master. Yin was surprised. Master? I have many masters. He's just one of them. It's not strange that he can see your background. But he's already an outsider. Even if he knows, he won't do anything. You don't have to worry. This isn't a problem of worry. Ian didn't know what to say. This person is your master. You should have at least told me in advance. Fortunately, I didn't do anything rash. If Xiao Ju glanced at her, seeing her uneasy expression, she laughed. What are you afraid of? Even if you did something, with me around, no one would dare to cause trouble for you. Ian made a tisk sound. You mean that I could do whatever I want in Shuo City now? Do whatever you want. Chapter 218. When He Yin and Xiao Ju returned to the He residence, He Sui and He Yunsheng were sitting peacefully in the room. Ian was stunned for a moment. He was a little surprised that they were so calm today. He Sui saw Xiao Ju and stood up with a smile. When I came back, I heard from Imperial Bodyguard Qi Wu that military governor Xiao took my daughter out. Now that you're back, have you eaten? Do you want to eat together? Ian said, I've eaten. There's no need. He turned his head to look at Qi Wu, who was standing at the side. Qi Wu turned his face away as if nothing had happened. Ian thought to himself, so this master and servant are colluding. Not only did they deceive me, but they also deceived my old father. Uncle, just call me Huaijin, Xiao Ju said. He Yunsheng coughed and choked on his own saliva. He Sui glared at He Yunsheng and stuffed a sesame seed cake into his mouth. Eat properly. There are guests at home. Don't spit rice everywhere. It's too rude. He said, It's fine. Father, Yunsheng, you guys eat. I still have something to say to Xiao Ju. I'll go back to the room first. After saying that, he pulled Xiao Ju and left. If she stayed here any longer, she would feel uncomfortable looking at Father He. He Sui smiled lovingly and said, Go. After the two of them left, He Yunsheng pulled the sentinel cake out of his mouth and said in a muffled voice, Father, is this really okay? What? Ian brought a man to her room. What would happen if word got out? In the past, when that bastard Fancheng was here, Ian would go out to look at him and you would fly into a rage. Why are you so tolerant now that military governor Xiao is here? He Sui scolded him. How can military governor Xiao be the same as Fancheng? They're both men. What's the difference? He Sui looked at He Yunsheng and was also puzzled. Didn't you admire General Fengyin the most before? Why are you acting so awkward now? He Yunsheng put down his chopsticks on the table and said angrily, General Fengyin can't go to a woman's room before marriage. Fengyin, did he go there himself? He Sui slapped his head. Are you blind? Your sister was the one who dragged him in there. There was no way to refute this. He Yunsheng's cheeks puffed up for a long time before he gritted his teeth and said, What a disappointing fellow. Lust blinded him. Ian didn't know that her actions just now had caused an argument between her old father and her silly little brother. She dragged Xiao Ju into her room, closed the door, and lit the oil lamp with a match. All right, there's no one here now. As soon as Xiao Ju entered the room, he felt that he had almost gone blind. Ian's room was very fancy. It was completely different from his usual temperament. Rouge, face powder, perfume sachets, and curtains were everywhere. People who didn't know better would think that there was a delicate young lady living in there. But when he looked back, the heroine who jumped on the table and poured tea was really an eyesore. He picked up a bronze mirror engraved with flowers on the table and asked in confusion, Do you like this? Ian glanced at it and said, How can I? These were all left by the original Lady He. She came back to her senses and said, Don't think that I like this. It's just that if I tear them all down, it will be very different from the past. It will be suspicious. And, she sighed, I already feel bad about taking over a magpie's room. If I change all of these things, I'm afraid that the real Lady He will come after me in the future. Xiao Ju frowned and said, Nonsense. Ian blinked. Don't mind the words of a child. Xiao Ju looked at her calmly and said, Aren't you afraid of me now? I've never been afraid of you. Ian smiled and said, Anyway, you know my secret now. She was like a scoundrel. Besides, when we fought on the mountain just now, I wasn't any worse than you. Your sword was even cut into two by my saber. Although she cheated, Xiao Ju smiled and thought of something else. What about your sword? Xiao Ju asked. What are you going to do about your sword? Ian's smile froze. Her sword was the Qinglang sword. Rather than saying that Xiao Ju was asking her what to do with her sword, it was more accurate to say that she was asking her what she planned to do with the Su family and the He family. When I got into trouble, it was the Su family and the He family who conspired together. He Rufei is a fake General Feihong. I have to expose this matter. During the battle at Huayuan, he tampered with the Fuyue army and caused the deaths of his trusted subordinates. I have to settle this score with him. He Yan's eyes were cold and sharp. I originally wanted to keep Mother Qin as a witness. There are still remnants of the Huayuan battle. If we search carefully, we might be able to find their whereabouts. Compared to He Rufei, Su Zhiheng's side is easier to deal with. As long as someone can prove that Su Zhiheng plotted to murder young Mistress Su, Su Zhiheng will definitely drag He Rufei down when he is in danger. At that time, we just have to follow the vine to find the melon, and this matter will be solved. Ian looked at Xiao Ju and asked, "What do you think?" Since her rebirth, she had been keeping her secret from others. Now that she suddenly had an ally, she suddenly felt relaxed. Even if Xiao Ju didn't do anything, as long as she had someone with her along the way, it would increase her strength. Sowing dissension? Yan's eyes lit up. Dissension would cause the enemy to suspect each other. Sowing dissension would cause dissension between enemies. Then should we send someone to He Rufei's side or to Su Zhiheng's side? Yan pondered. Either side is fine. Xiao Ju said, "I don't have that many people to use." "I do." Xiao Ju glanced at her. "I'll help you." Yan's lips curled up again. Suddenly, she thought of something and complained, "But why didn't you tell me that you sent someone to investigate Mother Qin? It wasn't easy for me to bribe the Su family servant, Fu Wang, and spend a lot of money on him. If I had known that you had already found out, I wouldn't have wasted my money. Now all the money is gone." "Yan," Xiao Ju interrupted her. "Do you have no money?" "Ahem." Yan put her fist to her lips and coughed. "It's not that I don't have any money at all." The next moment, there was a stack of banknotes on the table. Yan's eyes widened. She swallowed and looked away with difficulty. "I don't deserve it." Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows. "You really don't want it?" Yan quickly grabbed it and stuffed it into her clothes. "Take it as a loan. I have a salary now. I'll return it to you when I get my salary." "No need," Xiao Ju said. "You can keep it for yourself. If you don't have enough, you can come to me." Yan had lived for 2 lifetimes, but this was the first time she had experienced the feeling of squandering money like water. Although she didn't lack money in her previous life, when she was in the He family, she didn't experience the feeling of being a hedonistic son. Later on, when she performed a meritorious service, the emperor rewarded her with a lot of rewards. But today in the military camp, she borrowed a little from one of her brothers, and that friend's family had difficulties. In the end, there wasn't much left, and she gave it all to the He family. After she entered the Su family, she had to be a virtuous wife, but she couldn't be extravagant. Moreover, she was blind not long after, and the power of the family was in He Wanru's hands. She didn't even have a shadow of money. Now that she finally had a taste, it was not bad. "Xiao Ju, you're really a good person," He Yan flattered. "You're more kind than the Buddha of Yuhua Temple." Xiao Ju sneered. "You think that whoever gives you money is a good person? That's not it." He Yan said, "But other people ask me for things. There are very few people who are willing to give me things." She supported her chin with her hand and looked at Xiao Ju. "You don't seem to have asked me for anything." In her previous life, she had always been giving, whether actively or passively, emotionally or financially. Only this person in front of her had always silently given and never asked for anything. Xiao Ju lowered her eyes and looked at her. After a while, she suddenly said, "You feel wrong, don't you?" Ian straightened up. "What?" "You suffered a lot and gave the glory that you fought for to others. You're willing to return to the time when you had nothing. Don't you feel wronged?" he asked. Ian was stunned for a moment. After a long silence, she said, "In the past, I would feel that way, but now I don't." She smiled. "I have old man Yinsheng, Qing Mei, Xiao Mai, Shirtu, Wang Ba, and the others in you. It's much better than the previous life." "Really, Xiao Ju," she said seriously, "I don't feel wronged." Xiao Ju stared at her for a moment. After a while, She turned her head and said, "Idiot." He didn't think much of it. "Then you're still being fooled by the idiot. When we were in the Liang Province Guards, I knew who you were from the beginning. Second young master Xiao, military governor Xiao, secretly taught me swordsmanship when we were classmates. Who would believe that you did a good deed without leaving your name? Everyone will think that second young master Xiao has ulterior motives for me. And the mole on your waist, tsk. Xiao Ju's face stiffened. "Are you rebelling?" he asked. "It's the truth." Hien spread her hands. Xiao Ju stood up and was about to leave. "Oh, are you angry?" Hien hurriedly pulled on his sleeve and apologized. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have made fun of you. Military Governor Xiao, don't be angry. I apologize to you. What do I have to do for you to forgive me?" Xiao Ju's footsteps paused, and he suddenly turned around. Hien was sitting in front of the table and was startled by Xiao Ju's sudden turn. The two of them were extremely far apart. Xiao Ju bent over to Hien and said with a smile that was not a smile, "Is that so?" Hien stared at him blankly and nodded subconsciously. He leaned closer and smiled slightly. "Okay, let's get married as soon as possible." Hien was stunned. The young man's handsome face was right in front of him. His eyes were so deep that it seemed to suck him in. "Hirufei has begun to suspect your identity. It's too dangerous for you to be alone. I want to protect you." Almost 15 minutes after Xiao Ju left, Hien was still sitting in front of the table, thinking about what he said before he left. Yunxing frowned as soon as he came in. He asked, "Hien, did you pick up money or treasure? Why are you smiling so creepily?" Hien turned around and rubbed his face. He asked doubtfully, "Did I smile?" Yunxing sighed and sat down in front of the table. "No wonder Dad looks at General Fengyan like a fat sheep. With your qualifications, he must have a problem with his eyes or his brain to take a fancy to you." Hien picked up a leaf and threw it at him. "How can you talk about your elder sister like that? Do you look like an elder sister?" Yunxing looked at him with disdain. "You even pulled him into your room. Dad and I are also men. Cough. Why don't you pay more attention? Why are you even more old-fashioned than Dad?" Hien was puzzled. "You're so young, yet you're like an old man. I pulled him in because we have something important to discuss." "What are you thinking?" Yunxing said impatiently. "I don't care about you. I came here to discuss the dowry with you." "Hien, what?" The youth's face was filled with genuine distress. "Now that the emperor has bestowed the marriage, I have no choice but to get married. Xiao family is rich. Our family can barely support ourselves. I'm still in school, so I can't work to earn money like before. Although you're an official, you've been fined a year's salary. Now, only Dad is receiving wages to earn money. Originally, Dad and I saved the money you gave me for your future. Who knew that you'd find such a family? That money might not be enough, so what I mean is..." "What do you mean?" "Postpone the wedding date. When I start earning money in the future and earn enough for your dowry, you can marry into Xiao family." Hien, her silly younger brother, was really a genius. He could even come up with this kind of idea. Fortunately, Xiao Ju was not here. If she heard it, Yunxing would tear down her words right after she said that they should get married as soon as possible. "Isn't it just money?" Hien said, "At most, I'll go to Lutong village again." "You dare?" Yunxing said angrily. "It's fine in the past. Now, you're a famous person. How can you still fool around like you did in the past? If military governor Xiao finds out about this, what will he think of you?" Hien thought. Xiao Ju had already seen the picture with her. What else would he think of her? He'll think of her however he wants. Children don't know much and make a fuss about nothing. However, she also knew that this was how the youth was, so she said, "Fine, I won't go." "Isn't it about money?" She took out a stack of banknotes. This was the banknotes that Xiao Ju had given her just now. "I have a lot of banknotes here." Yunxing was stunned for a moment. "Where did you get the banknotes?" "I borrowed them from Xiao Ju," Hien said righteously. "If it's not enough, I'll ask him for more." "Are you crazy?" Yunxing reprimanded. "Who borrowed his money to prepare your own dowry? Do you think this is reasonable?" "It's not reasonable, but you don't have to be so surprised." Hien looked at him with a smile. "Actually, the dowry is not a big deal. You have to know that in this world, anything that can be solved with money is not a big deal." In reality, Xiao Ju did not care about the secret that she had died once, or that she was General Feihong. Either of these was more shocking than the dowry. But since Xiao Ju did not care about it, then there was really no need to worry about the money. I know that you are experienced and knowledgeable. He Yunsheng patiently comforted her. But when other women get married in Shuo Jing City, if they don't have a dowry, they will be looked down upon and gossiped by their husbands. But when other women get married in Shuo Jing City, they have to rely on their husbands to support them. He Yin said, I have a salary. You are being punished now. I have a salary. Our family background is not high. I have a salary. He Yunsheng was refuted by He Yin and finally said, Fine, you have a salary. In the end, you don't want to postpone the wedding date, right? You like General Feng Yin that much. Didn't you say it yourself? He Yin tilted her head and looked at him. If you were a woman, you would only love him. He Yunsheng choked and coughed. He swung his sleeves and stood up. Forget it. I think you are already so smitten that you won't listen to anything I say. Forget it. I will think of a way with father about the dowry. You take care of yourself. He Yunsheng left. He Yin sighed in relief. She lay on her back on the couch as she recalled Xiao Ju's words. Marriage. In her previous life, she was full of hope and expectation when she married another person, but the ending was frustrating. But this time, when she heard it from Xiao Ju's mouth, she did not feel too much resistance or disgust. It was as if it was her, she would still have hope. However, it was not only that. Xiao Ju was right. The current situation in Shuo Jing City was not stable. She had to deal with the He family and the Su family. With her current identity as Marquis Wuan, there were many restrictions. On Xiao Ju's side, Su Jingfu and the Crown Prince were also eyeing covetously. Yudo would enter the capital in a few days. The battle between the Crown Prince and the Fourth Prince had not yet ended. A storm was brewing into Wei. No one knew what the outcome would be. Just as Xiao Ju said, she also wanted to protect him. Xiao Ju returned to the mansion. He came back late. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei had already gone to bed. These years, he did not spend much time in Shuo Jing City. Even when he came back every year, he would leave early and return late. His brother and sister-in-law were already used to it. But the kitchen would always prepare hot food for him so that he would not have nothing to eat at night. The snow in the courtyard had been swept clean. He walked into the room, put drinking autumn on the table, and took off his outer robe. Fei Nu followed him in. Go to the Su family tomorrow, Xiao Ju said. Fei Nu was stunned. Young master, the Su family is not being watched by Luaning. I'm not asking you to investigate. Xiao Ju said, go find the Su family's gatekeeper, Fu Wang. Give him some money and make a deal with him. Fei Nu was stunned and nodded. Xiao Ju whispered a few more words to him. Fei Nu's face showed a bit of surprise. Although he did not understand why Xiao Ju wanted him to do this, he did not say anything and left the room. He sighed softly, and his gaze fell on the drinking autumn sword hanging on the wall. Tian's identity meant that he could only be cautious in his revenge and could not do it to his heart's content. But even if the He family and the Su family were allowed to live in this world for one more day, it would still make him unhappy. Ian could do some things that were inconvenient for him to do. There were some underhanded methods that Ian didn't want to use, but he didn't care. Xiao Ju stood up and walked in front of the drinking autumn sword. He reached out and touched the scabbard. The scabbard was as cold as snow. The youth looked down thoughtfully. The most precious things for a warrior on the battlefield were the war horse under him and the treasured sword in his hand. If he lost his treasured sword, it would be like a beast losing its teeth and fangs. This fool's past life was actually a process of constant loss. Even now, he wanted to take back everything that belonged to her. Even more. Chapter 219. The next morning, Ian woke up slightly later than usual. Last night, she kept thinking about things and couldn't fall asleep. She only fell asleep in the middle of the night. When she woke up, it was already late in the morning. It wasn't snowing today, so the sun was out. After washing up, she went to the main room to eat. As soon as she walked in, she almost bit her tongue. Why are you here? Ian asked. Someone was sitting at the table in the main room, drinking tea. Qingmei stood at the side. When she saw Yin, she answered anxiously. His Excellency came over early in the morning. He told me not to wake you up and to wait here for you to wake up. Xiao Ju put down the teacup in her hand. She glanced at her and asked, "Did you sleep well?" "It was okay." Hien scratched her head. She felt that Xiao Ju's sudden appearance was very shocking. She subconsciously looked at the roof. This was her house, not the Liang province guards. Qing Mei put the porridge and dishes on the table. Hien looked and said in surprise, "Qing Mei, did you get rich? So much food? These seem to be snacks from Qinshanji, right?" "His Excellency sent someone to deliver these." Qing Mei answered uneasily. Originally, the He family ate simple breakfast. It had been more than 10 years, so no one felt that there was anything wrong with it. Today, Xiao Ju sent someone to deliver such a large table of food. Qing Mei felt embarrassed and wondered if her family was too shabby. Ian didn't feel anything. It wasn't the first time she took advantage of Xiao Ju. She immediately applauded and praised. "Xiao Ju, you're so considerate. No wonder Yin Nongguang always said that having a wife is good. You're even better than Princess Shang. I can't find a single flaw." Chi Wu, who was standing in the corner, trembled when he heard this. Was this something a human would say? That was a little too shameless. It was a pity that their young master was bewitched to the point of confusion, but he actually looked quite happy. "Have you eaten?" Hien gave Xiao Ju a pair of chopsticks. "Let's eat together." Xiao Ju took the chopsticks. "Okay." Chi Wu. She finally knew why her master had left the Shao manor without eating breakfast. She had woken up so early to freeload her own food. He was really bored out of his mind. Usually, the He family didn't discriminate between master and servant. Qing Mei also ate together at the same table. But today, Xiao Ju was here. Qing Mei wouldn't come to the table, even if she was beaten to death. After hesitating for a while, she dragged Chi Wu away and said that she wanted to sweep the snow. Hien had no choice but to eat with Xiao Ju. Qing Mei's porridge was fragrant and soft. She had added red dates, so it was sweet. Hien remembered that this person didn't seem to like sweet things when she grew up. He asked, "I forgot that you don't like sweet things." She reached out her chopsticks and took the red dates from Xiao Ju's bowl. She smiled and said, "I'll help you." Xiao Ju paused. Xiao family members knew that he was very particular about cleanliness. He didn't like to use things that others had used, let alone pick food from his bowl. Even Xiao Jing couldn't do it. But Ian did this, so he didn't stop her. "But you didn't come here today just to eat breakfast with me, right?" Ian asked. "What's the matter?" "I plan to go to the Xianchang dojo." Xiao Ju said, "You'll come with me." Ian was stunned. "Why are we going to the Xianchang dojo?" "Since you want to expose He Rufei's identity, you need evidence. The Xianchang dojo still has your past essays and scrolls. Maybe they can be of use." "How is that possible?" Hien asked curiously. "Those are things from many years ago. How can the Xianchang dojo still keep them?" Xiao Ju pulled the corners of her mouth and looked at her with a mischievous smile. "Don't you know? General Fei Hong and General Feng Yun's calligraphy has been kept in the dojo until today. Every year, when new students come to the spring enrollment, everyone has to look at it." Hien almost choked on his own words. "Are you serious? My calligraphy? Heaven and earth." Xiao Ju was fine, but her calligraphy back then could not be considered very beautiful. Her handwriting was like a dog's crawl, but it was an exam paper that was always last place. What was there to look at? Over and over again, wasn't it insulting? Who would have thought that the last place in the Xianchang dojo would one day be on par with the first place and become the dojo's signboard? Sure enough, don't bully the young for being poor. Every dog has its day. "I actually don't really want to go," Xiao Ju said. "Oh." Hien made a sad face. "Okay, I'll go." After the meal, Hien and Xiao Ju went out together. He didn't feel this way when he was in the Liang province guards. But once he returned to the capital and put on Lady He's dress, he felt uncomfortable all over. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because Lady He's dress was too exquisite and complicated. Hien decided to simplify the complicated dress and put away all the straps. It was more convenient to go out. There was no carriage at the door. Hien paused and asked the person beside him, "Xiao Ju, where's the carriage? The weather is good today. Let's go," he said. It was a rare sunny day. The snow from last night hadn't melted, and the ground was glowing with golden warmth. When they walked under the sun, they felt that the haze of the past few days had been swept away. Their bodies felt warm from head to toe. He closed his eyes comfortably and said, "It would be great if it was this warm every day." Xiaoju turned her head and glanced at him. The young girl had a bright smile. A little sunlight was enough to make her happy. It was hard to imagine that the brave and fierce General Fei Hong on the battlefield was this silly person in front of him. The corners of his mouth curved slightly, and he restrained the smile in his eyes. The two of them walked side by side on the street. Even though wasn't very famous, Xiaoju's face wasn't unfamiliar. People recognized him from afar. Although they didn't dare to approach him, they still pointed and discussed in secret. "Isn't that General Feng Yin, military governor Xiao? Who's the girl beside him? I don't think I've seen her before." When did military governor Xiao walk side by side with a girl in the daytime? She must be the fiancée that His Majesty has bestowed upon him. Fiancée? Are you talking about the Marquis Yin? That's right, that's right. So Marquis Wen looks like this. She looks so soft and weak. How did she get on the battlefield? Yan's hearing was outstanding. He accidentally heard the discussions around him. Yan looked at the man walking beside him. His expression was calm and indifferent. Yan inexplicably felt that he had been brought out by Xiao Ju to show his face, so that people would know that Xiao Ju's fiancé, Marquis Wen, looked like this. "Forget it," she said to herself in her heart. "If they want to see, then let them see." In the past, when she wore a mask, she had to hide. Now that she was openly using this face, even if there were people who wanted to substitute her, it would be impossible. Along the way, they were surrounded by people. After walking for a long time, the two of them finally arrived at the entrance of the Xianchang Pavilion. Years had passed since they parted, but the Xianchang Pavilion still looked the same as before. The mottled door, the familiar plaque, and the apricot tree at the entrance bent under the weight of the snow. Ian looked and felt a little emotional. Her days in the Xianchang Pavilion were not very relaxing. Now that she thought about it, it was full of happy memories. The teachers here taught her to be reasonable and righteous. Otherwise, a girl who couldn't distinguish right from wrong and disguised as a man, even if she was a chess piece of the He family, would still be an ignorant chess piece that couldn't control her own fate. The most correct thing He Yuansheng had done in his life was to send her to the Virtuous Prosperity Dojo, which changed her life. "Let's go," Xiao Ju said. The two of them walked in together. As soon as they walked into the courtyard, they heard the sound of students reading in the academy. The way of the university is to be virtuous, to be close to the people, and to stop doing good deeds. After so many years, you're still memorizing this. He suddenly recalled the memories of improving together with Lin Shuanghe. It's strange. At that time, I couldn't memorize it no matter how hard I tried. Later, after I joined the army, I recited it every night when I had nothing to do in the camp. Then I memorized it. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows. "You memorized it in the camp?" "Of course," Hien said proudly. "In the beginning, before I met my master, my skills were not good, so I could only rely on my brain. You don't know, but in the Fuyue army, anyone who can read is very popular in the camp. They are good at both the pen and the sword." She began to praise herself again. Xiao Ju was about to say something when she suddenly heard someone's voice in front of them. Military Governor Xiao. The two of them looked in the direction of the voice and saw a middle-aged man wearing yellow hemp clothes quickly walking over. This man was very gentle and had an amiable appearance. When he walked in front of Xiao Ju and Hien, he smiled and said, "Military Governor Xiao, why did you think of coming to the academy today?" Hien was stunned. This was Huang Sankai, the teacher who taught mathematics in the Xianchang Academy. Hien had also taught mathematics in the past. During Hien's school life, because she was not outstanding in any aspect, it was very difficult for her to gain the teacher's favor. This Mr. Huang Sankai, perhaps because he was not very old at the time, was very gentle and amiable to his students. He did not treat his students differently because of their grades and was very accommodating. It was also this teacher who used to praise Hien in the academy. Diligent learning is like a sprout in spring. You don't see it growing, but it grows day by day. Look at Iru Fei. You should all learn from him. Because of this, a group of youths were dissatisfied with He Yin. However, when he saw this Mr. Huang, He Yin still felt very close. I was passing by here, so I came to take a look. Xiao Ju replied. Huang Sankai showed an expression of pride. Please come in, please come in. Don't blame this teacher for showing a fawning expression. Xiao Ju was now Dewey's famous General Feng Yun and the commander-in-chief of the Right Army. The reason why he did not get promoted was because even if he won the war, His Majesty did not have a higher position to promote him. Moreover, when he was in the Xianchang Academy, instead of saying that the teachers were teaching Xiao Ju, it was more accurate to say that Xiao Ju came to the Xianchang Academy to go through the motions. The teachers in the Xianchang Academy did not have anything to teach him. In order to avoid causing a commotion among the students, He Yin and Xiao Ju went to the teacher's room. The teachers rested in this spacious room during the day and only attended 3 classes a day. Today's class was literature, mathematics, and etiquette. Tomorrow's class was bow, horse, and saber. When He Yin and Xiao Ju walked in, there was no one else in the room. Huang Sankai first poured a cup of tea for the two of them and invited them to sit down. Then he got up and fiddled with the stove in the room. The stove in the room was warm, and a cup of hot tea was very comfortable. I did not expect Military Governor Xiao to be here today. Huang Sankai smiled and looked at He Yin. This is Marquis Wu, Miss He? He Yin quickly got up and bowed. He Yin greets teacher. She was bowing to the teacher as a student, but it gave Huang Sankai a fright. He quickly got up and bowed back. Miss He is too polite. Please sit down. He Yin sat down. Huang Sankai smiled and said to He Yin, when Military Governor Xiao was a teenager, he was very popular with girls. However, I have never seen him treat anyone differently. At that time, I was wondering what kind of woman his future wife would be. Now, that group of brats have all settled down and gotten married, but I don't see any movement from him. Now that the dust has settled, I can be at ease. This Miss He, Huang Sankai said to He Yin, is very different from ordinary girls. I have stayed in Shuajing for so many years and have seen countless girls. However, Miss He is the first one I have seen. Military Governor Zhao's eyes are really sharp. He Yin, Huang Sankai probably did not expect that the girl he was praising was a student that he had personally taught in the past. As they were talking, the door opened and someone came in. The two looked over at the same time and saw a thin old man wearing a brown robe and a high bun walk in. Mr. Wei, Huang Sankai stood up and said to the old man, Military Governor Xiao and his fiancée, Miss He, are here. Wei Xianzhong, the curator of the Xianchang Hall, looked at the two. He Yin and Xiao Ju stood up and bowed to him. Wei Xianzhong was not as friendly as Huang Sankai. He only nodded slightly, walked to his desk, and sat down. He put down the book in his hand. He was the one who was in class just now. He Yin leaned closer to Xiao Ju and whispered, Look, the person I am most afraid of is here. When He Yin was in school, he was most afraid of this Mr. Wei, Curator Wei. Wei Xianzhong was not a commoner. He had an official position. However, He Yin once thought that the reason why he founded the Xianchang Hall was because his personality was too unlikable. He was old-fashioned and strict. His colleagues in the officialdom did not like him, so they rushed him to be the curator of the school. Unlike Huang Sankai, who was gentle and amiable and never scolded students, Wei Xianzhong was excessively strict. As long as there were students with bad grades, they would always be punished by him. The students secretly called him Old Man Wei. As He Yin was the last in the Xianchang Hall, Wei Xianzhong naturally saw her as the shame of the Xianchang Hall. He Yin believed that if it wasn't for He Yuansheng persuading the Shibao and the fact that the Xianchang Hall didn't have the rule of driving out the accepted students, she would have been driven out by Wei Xianzhong on the first day she entered the Xianchang Hall. She would never be allowed to step into the school again. In short, in the memories of this gentleman, He Yin could only remember the unpleasant memories of being beaten, punished, scolded, and copying books. Even though she was no longer studying in the school and was not afraid of facing the Yudo, He Yin still felt a chill down her spine the moment she saw this old gentleman. "This is Miss He," Huang Sankai said with a smile. Wei Xianzhong picked up the tea on the table and took a sip. His scrutinizing gaze swept over He-Yan's body and said with a straight face, "You are He-Yan? How can a woman join the army to fight and show her face in public?" He-Yan, question mark. She didn't study anymore, but this old man Wei still wanted to pick on her and find trouble with her. He-Yan smiled and said, "It's just that the situation forced me to do so. Eating and living with a man is immoral and unorthodox. You don't know the rules at all. Xiao Huaijin has always been clean and honest. How could he be coaxed into the hands of a woman like you?" He-Yan, Huang Sankai wiped his sweat awkwardly. "Curator, Mr. Wei is too serious." Xiao Ju said lightly, "Missy didn't coax me. I like her first." Wei Xianzhong furrowed his brows and looked at Xiao Ju with even more disappointment. "A real man talks about love and love all day long. What's wrong with him?" He then glared fiercely at He-Yan. "Femme fatale." He-Yan's smile stiffened. After living for 2 lifetimes, this was the first time someone called her femme fatale. She took it as a compliment. But the way old man Wei looked at her, it was as if she was the demoness who brought disaster to the country. Xiao Ju was the fatuous ruler of the country. Could it be that her last-place temperament had already seeped into her bones? Even if she changed her body, as long as Wei Xianzhong saw her, he would still dislike her from the bottom of his heart. "We came here today to ask for a favor." He-Yan changed the topic. If she continued, she was afraid that old man Wei would use a long stick to chase them away. Huang Sankai asked, "What is it?" "We want to borrow the brush and ink that Rufei left in the academy," Xiao Ju said. When she said this, Wei Xianzhong and Huang Sankai looked at her in surprise. "What does military governor Xiao want to borrow Rufei's brush and ink for?" Huang Sankai asked. "It's me." He-Yan laughed. "I've always heard that General Fei Hong is a great general who is as famous as the governor. My heart is filled with admiration. I also heard that they used to be classmates, so I wanted to see the traces of General Fei Hong's past." "Nonsense. Ridiculous." Wei Xianzhong slammed the table. His face was green with anger. He pointed at He-Yan and said, "How can you be like this? He-Yan guessed what he wanted to say and thoughtfully reminded him. "Zhao Qin, Mu Chu, Zhao Samu Si, you." Wei Xianzhong was furious. He turned and looked at Xiao Ju. "Xiao Huaijin, this is the wife you chose." The corner of Xiao Ju's mouth twitched, and she said, "It's nonsense." "Sir, don't take it to heart. Please take a look at Rufei's brush and ink first. Rufei is a student of my Xianchang Academy." Wei Xianzhong flicked his sleeves and said, "He is also a famous general of Dawei. How can his brush and ink be seen by just anyone?" He-Yan thought to himself. He didn't expect her to be so important in Wei Xianzhong's heart. For a moment, he was touched, and his resentment towards this old man disappeared. "I'm not asking as a student," Xiao Ju said calmly. "I'm asking as the governor of the right army." Huang Sankai shuddered. He knew that when this young master was in the Xianchang Academy, although he didn't seem to cause trouble, he was definitely not an obedient person. Most of the time, he was just too lazy to do it. Now that he was talking about his official position, the Xianchang Academy couldn't act rashly in front of the right army's governor for the time being. He pulled Wei Xianzhong and squeezed out a smile. "What are you saying?" "If military governor Xiao wants to see it, he can do so at any time. General He's brush and ink are stored in the study. The two of you, please follow me." Wei Xianzhong was furious. "Huang Sankai." Curator Huang Sankai leaned closer to him and whispered, "That's Commander-in-Chief Xiao we're talking about. Besides, most of the students who attend the spring recruitment every year are here because of Commander-in-Chief Xiao and General He. If we offend Military Governor Xiao, in the future, Military Governor Xiao will spread the word that everyone else will go to the Imperial College. What kind of talents will our Xianchang Academy be able to recruit?" Wei Xianzhong didn't speak. He only knew how to teach and didn't know anything about politics or business. Ordinary chores were taken care of by Huang Sankai. At this moment, when he heard Huang Sansai's words, he knew that what he said was reasonable. In the end, he couldn't keep his face. He snorted and left in a huff. Mr. Wei is just a bit old-fashioned. He doesn't have any ill intentions. Huang Sankai didn't forget to rope in He-Yin. Miss He, please don't take it to heart. I know. He-Yin smiled and said, I won't take it to heart. That's good. Huang Sankai brought the two of them into the library of the Xianchang Academy and left first. The library had a total of 3 floors. The topmost floor retained the brushes and ink left behind by the students in the past. In the past few years, the most famous people in the Xianchang Academy were He-Yin and Xiao Ju. Therefore, the scrolls, paintings they left behind were sealed on the same shelf. The top row was Xiao Ju's, and the bottom row was He-Yin's. He-Yin took out a stack of exam papers and casually took out one. It was mathematics, and a C was clearly drawn on it. The paper was full of mistakes. The moment He-Yin saw it, she subconsciously hid the exam paper behind her back. Xiao Ju glanced at her and sneered. It's not like you haven't seen it before. Why are you hiding it? He-Yin pursed her lips and thought for a while. Then, she said, I think it's unfair. Xiao Ju took out a book and casually flipped through it. What's unfair? Think about it. He-Yin answered seriously. When you met me, I was at the lowest point of my life. I didn't know anything, and I wasn't good at anything. What you saw was the worst version of me. When I went to the battlefield, I knew everything. You didn't see me at my best. But when I saw you, you were always so good. He-Yin said, Don't you think it's unfair? Xiao Ju laughed. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly looked downstairs, and her expression changed slightly. Someone came in. It can't be, He-Yin whispered. Didn't Mr. Huang tell us to look for books ourselves? Why did he let other students in? If those students saw us, wouldn't it be lively again? But soon, she realized that this was not the case. The footsteps coming up the stairs obviously belonged to someone who knew martial arts. Xiao Ju and He-Yin looked at each other, and the two of them quickly hid behind another row of bookshelves. The distance between the bookshelves was very narrow. Only one person could pass through at a time. The two of them hid in the corner and had to face each other. Xiao Ju was very tall. He-Yin raised his head slightly and almost touched her chin. As the two of them breathed in and out, they could almost hear each other's heartbeat. He-Yin's palms couldn't help but sweat. He couldn't help but feel nervous. But this nervousness only lasted for a moment. Her gaze froze. The person who had sneaked up the stairs quickly rushed to the row of bookshelves that they were standing on. Then he took out a flint and lit the row of bookshelves that He-Yin was standing on. With a tongue sound, the fire ignited. He-Yin and Xiao Ju flew out. Stop! Chapter 2:20. The person who set the fire did not expect that there would be someone in the quiet library today. He was caught off guard and wanted to run, but Xiao Ju had already blocked his way. He was no match for her in martial arts. After exchanging one move, Xiao Ju dislocated his arm. He-Yin had already grabbed a long blanket to put out the fire when Xiao Ju was exchanging blows with the person. Fortunately, the fire was not big. The person probably thought that the library was easy to set on fire, so he did not use ointment. Otherwise, the two of them might not have been able to put out the fire. The fire was put out in time, so only half of the books were burned. He-Yin shook his head at Xiao Ju. Fortunately, nothing serious happened. The two of them looked at the person on the ground. He was young and wore a cotton shirt. At first glance, he looked like a student from the Xianchang school. His arms and legs were dislocated by Xiao Ju, so he could not move for the time being. He-Yin noticed that there were traces of martial arts training between his thumb and index finger. He could not help but frown. He doesn't look like a student from the Xianchang school. He must have snuck in. Ordinary students, even if there were martial arts courses in the school, would not have such thick calluses. It was obvious that they were caused by years of martial arts training. Xiao Ju looked down at him and asked coldly, "Who sent you?" The person only stared at Xiao Ju and did not speak. Wait a minute. He-Yin seemed to have sensed something. He stepped forward and grabbed the person's chin. Xiao Ju could not stop him. He-Yin said, "He can't speak. He's a mute." The person was forced to open his mouth. His mouth was empty except for half of his tongue. It's very dangerous. Xiao Ju pulled her up and pulled her behind. Don't get too close. The other party found a mute and deliberately snuck into the Xianchang school, just to set the library on fire. He Yan's attention was not on himself. He looked at Xiao Ju. It seems that someone has the same idea as us. Although there were rare and unique books in the hidden book pavilion, it was not enough to make people take the risk. What's more, the other party didn't send people to steal, but to set fire. Coincidentally, the one that was set on fire was the one that He Rufei had used. Just like how He Yin and Xiao Ju came to the Xianchang mansion today to find He Rufei's past handwriting in case of an emergency. The real young master, he also looked guilty and short of breath, which was why he couldn't wait to get someone to destroy the corpse. Xiao Ju asked, "What are your plans?" He Yin lowered his head and thought for a while. When he raised his head again, his expression had become relaxed. Since someone covets General He's notes, why don't we keep them for them first? As for this person, let's inform Mr. Huang first and see what he has to say. When Huang Sankai received the news and came over, he couldn't believe his eyes. He had only let Xiao Ju and He Yin into the hidden book pavilion for less than a stick of incense's time. How could someone suddenly set fire to it? Mr. Huang, Xiao Ju gestured to the person on the ground. Is this person a student of the school? Mr. Huang carefully looked at the face of the person who set the fire and shook his head. No, I've never seen this person before. Then that's it, Xiao Ju nodded. This person snuck into the school and just failed to set fire to it. I saw it. Mr. Huang hurriedly went to check the bookshelf that had just caught fire. The scattered test papers on the ground, the half-burnt book, and the smell of burnt wood in the pavilion all proved that Xiao Ju was not lying. Just now, someone did set fire to it. Why? Huang Sankai was at a loss. What enmity does this person have with our Xianchang school? Why did he set fire to the hidden book pavilion? Fortunately, it was the hidden book pavilion and not the school. But just now, if Xiao Ju and He Yin were not here, very few people would enter the hidden book pavilion. By the time the fire was discovered, it would be too late. Thinking of this, Huang Sansai's heart was filled with a layer of fear. This person is mute, He Yin laughed. He can't speak. Xiao Ju's voice was cold. I'm afraid it has something to do with the Yudo. Yudo? Huang Sankai was shocked. Why would the Yudo appear in Shuajing? Xiao Ju calmly said, This matter is confidential. I hope Mr. Huang can keep it a secret for me. Since it is the Yudo's conspiracy, it is better to beat them at their own game. Mr. Huang, please announce to the public that the hidden book pavilion caught fire and destroyed a shelf of books. Fortunately, the fire was put out in time and did not lead to a disaster. But General Fei Hong's notes were all destroyed. Huang Sankai was still very puzzled. This is related to the country. Xiao Ju's eyes were as sharp as lightning. I hope Mr. Huang can consider the overall situation. Huang Sankai trembled. Of course. But General He's notes. He and I are classmates. It is just some ordinary pen and ink. I will bring it back to Xiao family for safekeeping. In the future, when the real culprit behind the scenes is revealed, I will return it to you. Huang Sankai sensed something. He looked at the young man in front of him. The young man who was always lazy and indifferent had now shed his youthfulness. He was like an unsheathed sword, completely different from the past. He respectfully lowered his head and whispered, It is all up to Military Governor Xiao. As for this person, I will take care of it. Mr. Huang only needs to announce to the public that someone was burned to death in the fire. Huang Sankai nodded in agreement. After Huang Sankai finished his task, Chi Wu came in and took away the mute who had set the fire. He also took away a whole sack of He Rufei's notes. He Yin and Xiao Ju walked out. As they walked, he said, Xiao Ju, what happened just now? Is it okay? In the end, Huang Sankai was not a member of the Xiao family. He did not know how much he could keep secret for them. He Rufei was not a fool either. The people they sent out did not return. Even if Huang Sankai spread the news that the library was on fire, He Rufei might not believe it. It's okay. Leave it to me, Xiao Ju replied. Ian thought for a moment. I think that Su Zhiheng is probably still looking for Mother Qin's whereabouts. We must ensure their safety. Xiao Ju smiled carelessly. Don't worry. The Su family's hands cannot reach into the Xiao family. Yin was slightly relieved. However, today's relaxed visit to the Xianchang Pavilion to reminisce about old friends was disrupted by this sudden incident. He could not help but feel a bit heavy. As he walked to the door with Xiao Ju, he suddenly heard someone call out to her, "Miss He." Yin looked up and saw a man wearing an indigo robe standing not far away. He was as gentle as an orchid. It was Chu Zhao. He also saw Xiao Ju standing next to Yin. His eyes narrowed slightly, but his smile returned to normal. He walked forward and greeted, "Military Governor Xiao, Miss He." "Fourth young Master Chu, why are you here?" Yin asked with a smile. Ever since that day at the palace banquet, where Emperor Wenxian bestowed the marriage, she had not seen Chu Zhao. She only knew that the Su family and the Chu family were preparing for his marriage with Su Pingting. Compared to Yan's family background, Chu Zhao and Su Pingting's marriage, on the surface, seemed to be more well-matched. Although, Yan did not think that Chu Zhao liked Su Pingting, his fiancée, that much. "I came out to do something," Chu Zhao replied gently. Yan noticed that the servant following him today was an unfamiliar servant. Her appearance was average and was nodding Xiang. He could not help but look at the servant a few more times. The servant was not afraid. She stared back at him with a look of scrutiny. Ian pondered for a moment and understood. Presumably, Miss Su Pingting saw that Xiang was too beautiful by Chu Zhao's side. She was not at ease, so she sent another servant to follow him. On the surface, she was serving him, but in reality, she was monitoring him. After all, Chu Zhao had a dissolute father. His own appearance was outstanding, so it was inevitable that she would think more. However, Chu Zhao was a little pitiful. As a man, he could not even decide whether to keep his servant by his side. Today was just the beginning. Once he got married, that Miss Su Pingting would only become worse. The maidservant also looked at Yin with a bit of vigilance, as if Chu Zhao was a big fat piece of greasy meat, and all the women on the street were like hungry dogs, staring at him very closely. Yin did not want to get into trouble, nor did he want to be a target for others. He said, "Xiao Ju and I still have something to do. We will leave first." When Chu Zhao heard the two words Xiao Ju, he was stunned. His eyes looked at the two of them, and then he smiled. "Then, let's meet again another day." Yin nodded and pulled Xiao Ju away in a hurry. After the two of them left, Chu Zhao looked at the door of the Xianchang Pavilion. His eyes flashed with a trace of deep thought. The servant girl beside him urged, "Fourth young master, it's not early. You should go to the silk shop to choose cloth first." Miss said that all matters related to the wedding must be seen by fourth young master. The young man covered the haze in his eyes and smiled. "Okay." At the Su family's door, the servant Fu Wang was holding a broom and was currently sweeping the floor. He had been absent-minded for the entire afternoon. In fact, it had not been a day or two. Ever since he told the other party about Mother Qin's whereabouts, the mysterious person who was generous had not appeared again. Fu Wang felt very disappointed. He originally wanted to make a big profit from this person before leaving. He did not expect that he would disappear. He felt a bit of regret. He should not have told the other party about Mother Qin's whereabouts so early. Perhaps if he had delayed a bit longer, he could have squeezed more out of the other party. Once he got used to the easy way of getting money, Fu Wang felt particularly unsatisfied when he looked back at the meager monthly allowance. He swept the floor. Suddenly, a copper coin rolled in front of him. Fu Wang subconsciously followed it. He wanted to pick it up, but after taking a few steps, the copper coin was suddenly stepped on by a boot. He was startled. He raised his head and saw a tall man wearing a bamboo hat standing in front of him. The man said in a low voice, "Are you Fu Wang?" Fu Wang was startled and stammered, Yes. Tea house at the corner of the street. See you at the old place." After saying this, the other party lifted his foot and turned to leave. Fu Wang stared blankly at the dirty copper coin. He bent over and picked it up. He wiped the stain on it and put it in his sleeve. His heart was beating fast. When his companion who went to the toilet returned, Fu Wang used his diarrhea as an excuse to slip away. He went to the tea house where he used to meet with the mysterious person. It was still the innermost tea house. The man from before had already taken a seat. Fu Wang walked in with suspicion in his heart. Although this person's clothes were very similar to the previous person, they were not the same person. Compared to the previous mysterious person, this person in front of him was obviously much taller. Young master is the person who asked you to find Mother Cheen last time can't come now. The person who will make the deal with you in the future is me, Fei Nu said in a hoarse voice. Xiao Zhu asked him to come to the Su family in order to make a deal with this servant called Fu Wang. At the same time, He Yin would be safely removed from this matter to avoid leaving any evidence behind. Fu Wang was startled and carefully asked, "May I ask, the previous young master, dead?" The other party's voice was extremely cold. "So, don't ask what you shouldn't ask, and don't look at what you shouldn't look at." These cold words startled Fu Wang. Although he was greedy for money, he also cherished his life. When he heard that the previous mysterious person had died, he couldn't help but have a myriad of thoughts. After all, even now, he didn't know who that person was or why he was asked to find out Mother Cheen's whereabouts. Then, "Young master, why are you looking for me?" Fu Wang asked tentatively. "I want you to search the Su family for all the old belongings of the deceased young Mistress Su, as well as the whereabouts of all the people related to young Mistress Su." The man said concisely. Previously, he was looking for people and things related to concubine Mother He. Now, he was looking for young Mistress Su. "Why? Before Fu Wang could speak, he saw the man in front of him take out a box from beside him and put it on the table. He opened the box, revealing dozens of silver ingots neatly stacked inside. Fu Wang's eyes widened. This person was much more generous than the previous young mistress. The previous young mistress gave the silver ingots one by one. When did she become so generous? For a moment, Fu Wang threw his previous timidity to the back of his mind. His heart and eyes were filled with the silver ingots. "How is it?" Fei Nu asked. Well said. Fu Wang hugged the box in front of him. He was so happy that the corners of his mouth bloomed. "Even if this little one has to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire, this little one will still do this for young master. This matter is not simple." Fei Nu deliberately lowered his voice. "Your family's young master is bound to keep an eye on your movements. It's fine. There are also places where the Fu is lax. It's just that young mistress has passed away for a long time. Most of her old belongings were buried with her body. I don't know if there are any left." Fu Wang was probably dazzled by the silver ingots in front of him. He racked his brain for a while before saying, "However, young master was deeply in love with young mistress. The courtyard where young mistress used to live still maintains its original appearance. Perhaps one or two old items can be found. It's just that there are people watching the courtyard, so it's not easy to enter. However," he smiled fawningly, "this little one should be able to think of a way to enter." This person was really greedy. Or perhaps he had already pulled out the greed in his bones. Now that it was out of control, it saved Fei Nu a lot of effort. Fei Nu looked at Fu Wang, seemingly satisfied. He said, "Very good. These silver ingots are only a deposit. If you can complete the task I've entrusted to you, in the future, our young master will definitely not treat you unfairly." "May I ask?" Fu Wang gathered his courage and asked, young master is. This time, the person opposite him was not as mysterious as the previous mysterious person. He only arrogantly raised his head and said, "The current emperor personally conferred the title of General Fei Hong. He Rufei Gongzi." "General He?" Fu Wang asked in surprise. Why would General... He did not finish his words. Thinking of this person's words, "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." He smiled fawningly and said, "I know. This little one will definitely do a good job for General He." After the task was completed, Fu Wang returned to the Su residence. He did not want to be out for too long and arouse suspicion. Fei Nu sat in the tea room. He drank the tea in front of him in one gulp and also stood up to leave. In the Crown Prince's residence, there was music and dancing today. The Crown Prince was in an extremely good mood. He half leaned on the soft couch and watched the dancing maids. Su Jingfu sat beside him. "Prime Minister, why do you have time to visit me today?" The Guang Yin smiled and said, "Xylin and Pingting's marriage is approaching. The Su residence should be very busy." Su Jingfu smiled and replied, "The affairs of the residence are handled by my wife. Today, I came to see your highness about the matter of the Wu Tuo envoy." The Guangyin stopped drinking and looked at Su Jingfu. "Oh, what is Prime Minister's opinion?" "In less than half a month, the Wu Tuo envoy will arrive in the capital," Su Jingfu said. "Right now, there are more people in favor of peace than war. It will not be difficult to convince His Majesty. However, I hope that your highness will reconsider the matter of opening the market." "What does Prime Minister Su mean?" the Guangyin asked indifferently. "It was your idea to cooperate with the Yudo. Since it was the Yudo who suggested opening the market, why did Prime Minister Su change your mind at the last minute?" Su Jingfu was not angered by the Crown Prince's attitude. He only smiled and said, "It's not that I changed my mind. It's just that now that Xiao Huijin has won the war, the initiative is now in Wei's hands. There's no need to feign civility with the Yudo. Once the market is opened, it will be difficult to negotiate with the Yudo. It's better to raise the price now. Otherwise, won't the Yudo have the final say?" A hint of displeasure appeared on the Crown Prince's face. However, this expression was quickly concealed. Prime Minister Su's words are reasonable. However, Prime Minister Su needs to be clear about one thing. This prince, and the Yudo have private dealings. Once this matter spreads, how can there be a future? The Yudo has something on us. If we don't give them the right to open the market in Wei, will they let this matter rest? If they do something behind this prince's back, what if they delay this prince's great undertaking? The female performer in the room had unknowingly retreated. Su Jingfu was silent for a moment. He then cupped his hands and said to the Crown Prince, "Your Highness is wise." The Guangyin smiled slightly. At this time, a beautiful woman wearing a wide-sleeved hibiscus fairy dress walked in from outside. She held a small silver pot in her hand. She walked in front of the Crown Prince, knelt down, and offered the wine in the pot. The Crown Prince drank the wine in front of her in one gulp. Then, he pulled the woman into his arms. The woman raised her head, revealing a beautiful face. Su Jingfu finally saw clearly that it was Ying Xiang, who was given to the Crown Prince by Chu Zhao a few days ago. Ying Xiang saw Su Jingfu and smiled sweetly. Ying Xiang greets the Prime Minister. The servant sent by Xylan is indeed clever and quick-witted. The Guangyin pinched the beautiful woman's face in satisfaction. She's quite worthy of this prince's goodwill. Very good. Ying Xiang rebuked. Your Highness is too kind. This servant doesn't dare. Su Jingfu's smile froze slightly. In the past, this servant by Chu Zhao's side was too beautiful. Su Painting had brought this servant to him many times to punish Ying Xiang. However, Su Jingfu also found out that Ying Xiang was saved by Chu Zhao at the entrance of the brothel. It was probably because Ying Xiang's experience reminded him of his mother, Yi Runmei, that he had a whole new level of respect for Ying Xiang. Chu Zhao was someone he had his eyes on. Su Jingfu did not want their teacher-student relationship to be damaged because of a little servant girl. Moreover, Ying Xiang had always been by Chu Zhao's side. This could also be a test. If Chu Zhao was only a man who was greedy for beauty, then he would not be of much use. There was no need for him to stay by Su Painting's side. After so many years, Chu Zhao had obviously accepted the test. He had no romantic feelings for Ying Xiang. As Chu Zhao and Su Painting's wedding date approached, Su Painting became more and more anxious. It was not that Su Jingfu did not know that Su Painting had privately gone to find the Crown Prince of Guangyin. However, he did not have any intention of stopping her. In the future, Chu Zhao would be Su Painting's husband and Su Jingfu's son-in-law. If a little servant girl made his daughter unhappy, he would kill her, not to mention giving her away. Chu Zhao should have a balance in his heart. Chu Zhao made the right choice. Su Jingfu was very satisfied. Such a smart young man who knew how to make a choice was rare in the current Shuo capital. In the past, Su Jingfu's impression of Ying Xiang had always been that although she was beautiful, she was timid and quiet. She was an ordinary servant girl who did not cause trouble. However, now that he saw Ying Xiang smiling sweetly and leaning against the Crown Prince, Su Jingfu felt a sense of unease. The crown prince's residence never lacked beauties, nor did it lack smart people. The battles in the harem were not as easy as the politics in the imperial court. When Su Pingting sent Ying Xiang into the crown prince's residence, she did not have any intention of letting her live. However, so many days had passed, and Ying Xiang was living well. She had even received the crown prince's love. This was not something that could be achieved with just beauty. The innocent beauty's eyes were clear, as if she did not understand the filthy things of the world. Among all the beauties, she was like a dewdrop in the morning, with a fragile purity. Even the Guangyan, who did not cherish beauties, looked at her with pity. Su Jingfu sat for a while, then got up and left. After he left, the Guangyan ordered the servants to take away Su Jingfu's bowl, chopsticks, and cups. An old man. He is just a prime minister, but he thinks he is some big shot. He even wants to meddle in my affairs. The crown prince's Guangyan's eyes were filled with viciousness after Su Jingfu left. I think his hands are reaching too far. Ying Xiang leaned against the Guangyan, her small hand gently stroking his chest to help him breathe. She comforted him softly. Your Highness does not need to be too angry. This world will belong to your Highness in the future. Your Highness will do whatever you say. Why do you need to listen to others? These words greatly pleased the Guangyan. The Guangyan kissed her on the cheek. You little girl, you know how to talk. Be careful. Prime Minister Su might find trouble with you if he hears this. Even if Prime Minister wants to find trouble with this servant is your Highness's servant. Your Highness will definitely protect this servant, right? Ying Xiang said sweetly. Even if I am your Highness's servant, it is still better than most people in the world. Also, let me tell your Highness a secret. She leaned closer to the Guangyan, looking very charming. This servant was not like the other beauties, who either flattered him or were afraid of him. The Guangyan liked it very much, so he asked, "What secret?" This servant also does not like Prime Minister Su, Ying Xiang said with a bitter face. Prime Minister Su has too many rules and always has his own ideas. I am really afraid that one day, Prime Minister Su will even interfere in your Highness's affairs. If your Highness sends this servant away, that would be terrible. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.